All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have a domination tournament this evening. It is going to be another one of the no pros, no problem domination tournament hosted by Sandwich. So it is going to be kind of the more middle of the pack. We're not going to be seeing any of the people who are just going to steamroll through the competition. So we're getting to a few new names on stream, some similar ones that we've seen in the past as well. And we do have our first matchup currently getting selected. It is actually not the Empire. It is going to be instead Tomb Kings versus Dark Elves for our first one, as we have Leech Lord and the Phoenix King going to be making their first appearance in the semifinals. The other semifinal is still yet to be finalized. One of them is going to be F-Pod. We'll take a look at the bracket and how that's going to be looking. So F-Pod and are to be decided, and then against the Phoenix King and Leech Lord for our other semifinal. So looking forward to some good fun this evening. So for our first matchup, Tomb Kings and the Dark Elves. I think in the past, Tomb Kings have definitely been very, very strong here. However, I think the Dark Elves definitely have a bit more teeth and have a lot better chance than they have in either just earlier versions of 3 and then even going back into Warhammer 2. Tomb Kings still were able to handle Dark Elves pretty efficiently, but the Dark Elves have a pretty mean infantry line, and they're going to be able to trade a lot better, especially now that the Hecker Warriors aren't quite the just lawnmowers that they have been in the past. So we'll see how both sides are going to be kind of picking out their factions. So yeah, I should update our first pick ban as well, but it is Tomb Kings and Dark Elves. And, oops, wrong one. All right, there it is. So, and our first map as well is going to be the Bleak Spire Labor Camp. It's going to be one of the map packs from the Total Tavern mod pack. So we're going to be able to see a bit more variety, and it is going to be a little few maps that haven't been played all too often, that aren't in the general same rotation. Just gotta get a little things more mixed in, see if anything kind of work out. Phoenix King is ready on the Dark Elves. Now we are still just waiting on Leech Lord, but it looks like he is pretty much ready to go as well. So we should be getting right into the action. Both sides are now readied up, so let's dive on in. And as soon as that starts loading, we'll switch that scene over and get a little sneak peek at what both armies are bringing. So we got a little bit of elite stuff with the Dark Elves. We have Harkonness Executioners, the Sisters of the Singing Doom with some Bleak Swords, Corsairs, and triple bolt throwers on their side. Bolt throwers should do very well against any artillery pieces, any of the constructs. And we do have some Ushapti, some Screaming Skulls, a bunch of Necron Warriors. We have the Kepra Guard and 4 Spears as well in the starting roster with us, Sepulchral Stalkers, and Arkan the Black is going to be gracing the battlefield with his presence. A little bit of a different pick. You almost always are going to be seeing the pretty much a Lore of Nehekra caster. Just their passive is so very good here. So hopefully audio still been picking up. Should just be a little quiet while we're waiting for both sides to load in. But we can take a little bit look at the map, so let's kind of pick out just a bit. So we're going to have 1 point here in the center, followed by some points, one up on the ridge and another one down in the central plain. So it is going to be 2 kind of readily available to each other, with that third one going to be kind of more of that odd one out. Going to be a lot harder to get any kind of supporting fire on there from both sides. And in terms of artillery, there is going to be a plenty of kind of just things just kind of scattered about the map for the Tomb Kings to hide kind of their longer range stuff away from the bolt throwers. So that's going to be kind of just one of the things, is really a lot of the Dark Elves forces are going to be trying to kind of deal with the Ushapti and the Screaming Skulls. It's going to be a lot harder for them to see these, the Eyes of the Desert, the Sepulchral Stalkers, just because they have that stock, so they're going to be nice and hidden. Otherwise, for Ark in the Black, for his kit, looks like he is going to be on horse, and he does have the Tomb Blade of Arkan, Staff of Nagash, the Lyra Mortis, as well as the Fate of Yuna and Spirit Leech, so nothing too out of the ordinary for his kit, at least. The only thing really that out of the ordinary is the fact that he is actually on the battlefield, and then we have kind of gone over the armies, but again, Bleak Swords in that front line with some Corsairs going to be kind of coming in the reserves, hoping to really kind of blender through all of those skeletons. And then the Sisters of the Singing Doom, they do have terror that's only going to be helping themselves here, going to make themselves immune to that fear and terror that the opposing Tomb Kings will bring. Those triple Reaper Bolt Throwers, and then a Supreme Sorceress of Fire, bringing just Burning Head, and the Black Horror, a little wind spell here, can do some pretty decent damage, but not necessarily something that you're going to be seeing all too often. We'll see if they're able to get a good cast on that, see if it's going to be worth the money to be bringing here in this fight. Otherwise, I think the Tomb Kings, even though they are kind of setting up more on that lower ground, are going to benefit a lot more if they kind of move up towards that top bit, just because all of that artillery that the Dark Elves are going to be bringing, it is going to be putting a lot of pressure on their more ranged units. And if you can get these Screaming Skulls kind of off into the side here, they're going to have a lot better fire arc than those Reaper Bolt Throwers, so they should be able to kind of stay out of the danger zone too much. But if they do put much pressure down into that lower field, we're going to be seeing the Dark Elves pretty much fire away unabated into their opposing force. So definitely going to be seeing how the Tomb King's going to be reacting here. We have gotten underway, so both sides now going to be pushing forward. Bolt Throwers with the rest of the Dark Elves are going to be moving into that bottom field. With just some token forces of Bleak Swords, and those Corsairs are going to be putting that pressure onto that top field. So if there's enough of those Necron Warriors, they should be able to deal with those, but the Corsairs definitely are going to trade well into all of the, except for the Kepler Guard. Kepler Guard, which they are going to be going up onto that top field, should be able to almost pretty much solo all three of those units without any assistance from that Supreme Sorceress or any more summons coming in onto the field. We'll see what both sides have in their reserves as things kind of get underway, as your Bolt Thrower is going to be getting set up themselves. Take a look at the fire arcs just to see how close they have to go. They are going to trying to get into range against those Ushapti and the Screaming Skulls. Screaming Skulls should be able to open fire themselves, but they are going to be heavily outmatched, so they're going to either have to drop their artillery piece at some point or try and get some cover before all three of these do open up against them. Screaming Skulls get their first volley underway, and it is going to be firing right into these Bleak Swords, doing some pretty decent damage so far, but their shots are going to be only very numbered if they stay where they are. But we are going to be getting some Necron Horsemen coming in reserves, because one thing that we're going to be seeing, though, is there isn't a whole lot of super heavy frontline forces. I mean, the Blades of the Blood Queen are going to be very strong with those Hargoness Executioners, but they still are going to be outnumbered. They can only be so many places at once, so Tomb Kings are going to be trying to force their way into those Reaper Bolt Throwers, try and shut them down. Arkan does get a Spirit Leech off onto one of the Reaper Bolt Throwers, going to be doing some pretty decent work against them, and hoping to try and peel off as many of their units as possible. But the Spirit Leech is not going to be able to do much, because first off, the Screaming Skull has lost 2 of its artillery pieces so far, and is very quickly probably going to be losing that third one. So now at this point, that range isn't going to be doing all too much for them. And a nice, beautiful Burning Head, though, is going to be, actually, no, this is going to be that scroll that we're seeing, as it is just going to rake right through these Necron Warriors and those Spearmen as well, not doing all too much damage. Most of the units were able to kind of push themselves forward, but this thing is going to just continue to kind of just mow its way down. It did arc a little bit too much against their own Black Arc Corsairs. Going to be doing a bit of friendly fire with that, and now here is going to be that Burning Head is going to be trying to arc its way through the skeleton and hit some of the warriors as well, try and break through as much of those low armored infantry. One is going to be going down as the Spirit Leech does drop on the Supreme Sorceress of Fire as well, trying to whittle her down. I think that first Spirit Leech definitely would have been nice to have gotten on to that Supreme Sorceress instead of this Reaper Bolt thrower, because at this point that pretty much didn't do much at all. But now all of these rear bolt throwers, seeing these sepulchral stalkers, are going to be just eyeing straight against them. That's definitely going to be the target that they're going to be wanting to hit, as these Necron horsemen are going to be kind of pull it back, as the Dark Riders are going to actually, the horsemen are over here, the Dark Riders are going to be kind of pushing their way into the back line, getting a little assistance on the front as they charge into these horsemen, and looking to get a rear charge with this other unit, also trying to shut down these Eyes of the Desert themselves, as they're going to be getting some decent volleys off onto the front line, as the Liber Mortis does pop off on these guys just as the engagement gets underway. Dark Riders aren't going to be lasting too long against the Eyes of the Desert, but with these Bleak Swords here and just the continued fire from all of these rear bolt throwers, it's going to be doing a nice bit of damage, just kind of slowly picking them off one by one. Ushabti Summon is going to be dropping down on top of that rear bolt thrower in the rear, and then up on the hill, engagement is kind of going pretty well for the Dark Elves overall. They do not have that top point. Tomb Kings were able to take that initially, but Necron warriors are holding firm. The Kepler Guard coming in a little late, definitely could have been up here a little bit earlier for them. They definitely need that elite presence up there. There's not a whole lot, but it looks like the Supreme Sorceress might be trying to, and that is exactly what it should be doing, getting a Burning Head right through the Kepler Guard. Not exactly the best aimed. It is going to be doing a little bit of damage, but those Kepler Guard are going to be able to shake that off pretty well, as the Ushabti continue to do some good work shutting down those Reaper Bolt throwers, as the Eyes of the Desert are kind of getting a little swarmed. And as soon as these Blades of the Blood Queen get engaged with these Eyes of the Desert fully, because it looks like only a few units are kind of doing a little chip damage to some of them, that is going to quickly take these guys out of the fight once and for all. Those elite units will just blend right through those deserts, and that's pretty much it for the ground units. There's not much left for the Tomb Kings down in this lower field. Only Arkan trying to Spirit Leech that Supreme Sorceress, and doing a pretty decent job of that, but unfortunately most of the rest of the forces for them are kind of off the table. Phoenix King doing very well, the Dark Elves sitting nice and comfortable in the damage department, and especially the field presence is probably going to be even more important here, as the Dark Riders are going to be able to kind of put a lot of pressure on to these Ushabti, and there's just very little units, and none of the units that the Tomb Kings need at this point are going to be really quick to get onto the field. All these skeletons are going to take their kind of sweet time, and here is going to be that Burning Head that they wanted to cast early on, right through the Kepler Guard, doing a lot of damage there, as the Supreme Sorcerer continues to just kind of try and kite away from Arkan. Arkan does get another Spirit Leech, and this one, with a few hits from himself, might be enough to send that Supreme Sorceress off the field, but she's already done a pretty decent job so far. Burning Heads have been able to kind of chew through some of the more elite units, and with all of this mobility here, that is just going to be able to pretty much overwhelm these Kepler Guard. Though the Tomb Kings still barely are holding on to that top point, though with the Bleak Swords kind of coming in here and plenty of units kind of off in the reserve, they should be able to take that top point here in all good time. Dark Elves do control both points 2 and 3. And down does go that Lord for the Dark Elves, though she has done some pretty decent work so far, and just considering the rest of that, the Dark Elf army has just pretty much tabled the Tomb Kings at this point. We need, as many forces as it can. These Tomb Guards with halberds are trying to at least kind of free up these Ushabti, able to push back all of these Dark Riders with fairly ease, but the Blackheart Corsairs and the rest of the units, and especially those Blades of the Blood Queen, are going to be able to do very excellent work against those Tomb Guard. And you can just see the Kepler Guard now just kind of getting overwhelmed by Dark Riders, Bleak Swords, and these Corsairs are going to be looking to kind of wrap around as well. But Arkan does drop down a Skeleton Warrior summon just to kind of give a little bit of assistance and prevent these Corsairs from trying to get too much of a surround on these already pretty beaten down Kepler Guard. And unfortunately, though, they have lost that top point, so it's now is going to be a triple cap for the Dark Elves, and they are sitting pretty comfortably in the bottom field here, just going to be nice and comfortable. Holding the line with these 3 units is going to take quite a bit for the Tomb Kings to kind of push into that with those Blades of the Blood Queen there. But the Tomb Kings are going to be trying to put a little bit more pressure on their far flank as they bring in some Spearmen, just some Skeletons, actually some Tomb Guard, but they are going to be quickly getting rampaged by the Sisters of the Singing Doom, trying to get some Skeleton Horsemen as well. They have been able to push back the Dark Riders, but the Sisters of the Singing Doom should probably go down eventually to these numbers, but already they have a very long way to kind of get back into the fight. They should be able to have enough pressure here to get into point 3, but if we look at the far side, it looks like they are actually starting to kind of take back point 1, but both sides of the Tomb King's army now are on opposite sides of the map, so they're not going to be able to really support either side. It is going to be one or the other. The Ushabti might be able to get a few shots in, but the center units for the Dark Elves are going to be able to kind of just really make sure that these Ushabti stay away, especially with the Blackheart Corsairs now coming up. That is again going to be forcing these Ushabti farther and farther back. And even as I kind of mentioned that, some more Harkonnens Executioners have made their way on top of this field, and they are going to be kind of holding that objective even now, and they're just going to be able to just tear apart everything on the field. These Tomb Guards with halberds are not going to stand a chance against those Harkonnens Executioners, and there is not much that can really effectively deal with them other than the Ushabti, who are being chased down by those Dark Riders as well. And on the far side, the Sisters of the Singing Doom are holding on for quite a long time, and in the meantime, the Skeleton Horsemen have tried to kind of push their way up, but more Harkonnens Executioners. This is actually quite a few kind of elite units. That is going to be the third one for the Dark Elves, and they've been able to, I mean, they're just going to be such a thorn in the Tomb King's side, especially with not having nearly enough units to kind of deal with them. Normally, you'd like to have the catapults or Ushabti. The Chosen of the Gods are definitely probably one of the better units for the Tomb Kings to deal with that elite units, but unfortunately this is not going to be a battle that is going to allow the Tomb Kings to really kind of get those guys set up. I think the Tomb Kings definitely need to be a little bit more, either stay back a little bit longer and build up some of their forces, or focus more on this high ground up here, but instead they kind of went too much in on the lower ground, just got shot to pieces by all of those Reaper Bolt Throwers, and the Reaper Bolt Throwers have been dealt with, but they definitely got the job done that they needed to, and I think now is only a matter of time. The damage value isn't too obscene in the damage department, but just what's on the field. Cold Ones, Red Knights, Harkonnens Executioners, all units. The Tomb Kings just don't have anything that is going to be able to do anything other than just try and win by sheer amount of cap weight, but there's just nothing on the field for them. And I think this is pretty much, and we are going to be seeing some more Ushabti kind of come onto the field, but they're going to take quite a bit of time to kind of generate the value that they need to really make a difference, and especially with these Corsairs pushing off these guys. There's just not much on the table for the Tomb Kings, and Dark Elves looking pretty strong in the first battle of the evening. And I guess we'll just kind of chill out, see how things shakedown for the rest, but I really just don't see any good way for the Tomb Kings to kind of bring things back. Guns Horsemen are going to be getting hopefully they'll be getting a charge into these Dark Riders. Dark Riders are going to be looking to intercept them and kind of just keep them off of point 3, and they will be getting the charge, and yeah, that is going to be our first match pretty much as things were looking at that point. So let's take a look at the after battle report to see how things did fare in the end. So for the Dark Elves, we'll go over them first, as they did take that first victory. Supreme Sorceress was able to get 1,200, so she's able to get some pretty good value, and she is quite cheap, especially when she is on foot. Blades of the Blood Queen did all right. The Sisters of Singing Doom did very well, and then the rest of the frontline units, nothing too special for the Bleak Swords. Corsairs, on the other hand, getting some nice amount of value with them. And the Reaper Bolt Throwers might not have a ton of value, but they were able to pretty much table that Screaming Skull, only allowing 166 damage from that. Ushabti only getting 657, and the Eyes of the Desert also only getting 391. So really some very expensive units there on the Tomb Kings, not getting any kind of value whatsoever. For the reserves, the Harkonnens Executioners doing pretty nice, and even these Corsairs, and all of the Dark Riders just running rampant, just a ton of mobility in the reserves, and they did very well just saturating the field and just kind of the Tomb Kings just didn't have the units to kind of pull in all the directions that they wanted to. For their units, nothing too ridiculous. One of the Necron Warriors did pretty well, but otherwise the rest of the infantry not doing too much. Arkan did pretty good at about 2k. And then for the rest of the units, Necron Horsemen doing some decent work with one of them. Otherwise, that was pretty much a pretty just meh performance from the Tomb King side. None of their units generating too ridiculous amounts. So let's go back to that main screen as we're getting into our next one, which will be on Battle for Itza. It's going to be a little bit more familiar map, a lot more smaller, pretty open. So we'll see what we're going to be seeing for the army. So for the Phoenix King, he has picked Khorne Greenskins, banning Vampire Coast, and then the Lich Lord is going to be going with the Lizardmen for his pick, so we will update that on the screen. So game 2 will be Lizardmen, and it is going to be in return, it is going to be Khorne for the Phoenix King. We'll update the score as well. So Phoenix King is up 1-0. And now that we got a little bit more time, we can kind of go over how the picks and bans for this are working, because it is a little bit different. I have kind of trimmed down the UI a bit for that. So in the past tournaments of this format, we've been doing a pick 5 and with a global ban then of 1. So then you have a faction pool of 4 to work with at the end. And then it's a pick 2, ban 1 until the final game, in which case it's just a pick 2 of your remaining 2 factions. For this tournament, it is now a pick 7 with 3 bans. So both sides going to be picked 7 factions total. And for those, Phoenix King went with Warriors of Chaos, Khorne, Bretonnia, Greenskins, Vampire Counts, Dark Elves, and Slaanesh. Leech Lord went with Lizardmen, Greenskins, Slaanesh, Empire, Tomb Kings, Beastmen, and Vampire Coast. And then after that, we had Leech Lord ban Walk, Counts, and Slaanesh against Phoenix King, and Phoenix King banned Greenskins, Coast, and actually no, that was he banned Slaanesh, Greenskins, and Beastmen. So it is just kind of generating a little bit larger pool. So it gives a little bit more agency in deciding kind of what you pick and ban. It is kind of be a little bit of a hope to kind of mix up the matchups just a little bit. So it's not going to be just all of the top factions in mirrors every single time. And so, I mean, we're seeing Lizardmen here in Khorne, some more, definitely not the top tier, but Khorne definitely very solid. And I think they have plenty of tools that they need to deal with the Lizardmen. Lizardmen will definitely have a bit more on the mobility and kind of just more of the utility, I think, overall. Saurus are going to be fairly strong, but against like Warriors of Chaos or even some of the more elite units like Chosen, they might struggle a bit into them. We'll have to rely a bit more on the spells and kind of some of the ranged units as well. Like Ripperdactyls and stuff kind of keep the skies clear against any of the Chaos Furies and the like. Both sides getting pretty close to finishing out what they're after. So we should be getting into this fairly quickly. And then once both sides are ready, we'll be able to give you guys a little sneak peek. But until then, we will kind of keep on this screen. And I'm guessing if I look at the tournament, we should have our top semifinalists ready to go. So yeah, we do have Pinkamena is going to be facing off against FPOD, and they should be underway now. We might be able to grab a game or two depending on how this series finishes up. But we are now loaded in, so we can take a quick look at the screen before everyone gets into the map. So it looks like we have Valkia, a couple cultists, Chaos Warriors, Minotaurs, and then just a Chaos Marauder for Khorne for the starting army. And then as for the Lizardmen, we're going to be seeing Slann, it looks like a Rev Crystal, I believe. And then we'll be seeing some Saurus Spears, some Skinks as well. We'll have a rather interesting centerpiece as well. We'll see how well that's going to kind of play out. They won't have to worry too much about getting shot to pieces. Khorne does have some skirmish cav, but for the most part they won't be able to put too much effort into that range department, though they have plenty of large units that can take down even larger foes. Yes, blood for the blood god indeed. Khorne will be having some rather misshapen lizard skulls, I'm sure, to adorn as they offer up some of their own. We're just waiting on the Phoenix King, but the lizards will be having home field advantage here as they are going to be battling on the fields of Itza. Looks like we are now both sides fully loaded in. So I didn't mention it out loud initially, but the Shredder of Lustria is going to be that centerpiece for the Lizardmen. Going to be just trying to put as much terror onto the field as possible. It does have a nice nifty bit with that dread aversion, -8 leadership, but Khorne has some pretty decent leadership overall. Some of their more quicker, fast-moving stuff, maybe a little less so. All of those Sora Spears, and there's that Revivification Crystal. And where did that Slann go? Let's see what we've got for that kit. So Slann is going to be having, of course, Cold-Blooded, the Blood Statue of Spite, as we have the Shield of the Old Ones, Bound Banishment, and then we have Regrowth and the Dwellers Below. So Regrowth, definitely a need for that Shredder, and then Dwellers Below does some very nice damage if you can get a lot of stuff blobbed up against it. And of course on the other side we have Valkia the Bloody, as she is going to be bringing in her Spear as her only kit. Pretty standard. And then 2 of the cultists. Looks like they are both going to be, they're both going to be on foot, looking to just kind of get into places where the opponent doesn't want to be. It doesn't look like we have any. Actually, one of them has the Gate of Khorne and Foe Seeker. The other one just bringing that Gate of Khorne. And then we have those Minotaurs with great weapons, so they will definitely wanting to get on top of that Shredder. It is probably their best anti-large other than Valkia, but that Shredder is definitely going to be wanting to eat very healthily today. Otherwise, Marauders and some Chaos Warriors for that front line. And especially if you can get that Shredder mixed in with those Spears, those Minotaurs are definitely going to have a lot more trouble in dealing with it. So we'll see if there's much more in the reserves, because I don't know if that's going to be quite enough to bring down that Titan. So we shall see indeed as we are now underway. Shredder is going to be striding valiantly forth. He definitely has plenty of support with that Revivification Crystal, and the Regrowth should keep it topped off, and I don't really doubt that it is going to be pretty much hitting its heal cap, but that just is a ton of HP for Khorne to kind of work their way through, as Valkia is going to be kind of pushing forward. Might be trying for an early spear, maybe trying to hit some of these units, but I think definitely going to be wanting to wait a bit until they are in a little bit more of a static formation. But there isn't a whole lot that she has to worry too much about. She's taken a little bit of poke damage, though, from the Shredder. The Shredder does have some missile units. Is going to be able to just kind of slowly pluck away a little bit at Valkia's HP. But more of these skin cohorts is going to be kind of firing away. I think Khorne looking to be charging right on forward. And definitely in terms of infantry here, they have more than enough to kind of deal with these skinks. And there's only 1 unit of Sora Spears, and they should be able to kind of at least break the backs of these spears, especially with Valkia in support. A nice of her own spear might be enough to really break that support that the Shredder needs, but the Shredder is just going to town against these Minotaurs. Minotaurs already just taking a ton of HP damage. The Shield of the Old Ones does go down, and just giving that 20% damage resist and leadership up. And here is that Spear me trying to break right on through, does a ton of damage to those skink cohorts at the end, and does a little bit more to those Sora Spears, but they were a little bit more spread out. More units charging in as the forces of Khorne going to be bringing in some Marauder Horsemen, as they're going to be looking to just fire away right at that Shredder of Lustria. And they won't be able to do damage super quickly, but definitely going to be what those guys are going to be targeting for, and the rest of the Lizardman forces kind of spread out a little bit. Not a whole lot left in the support. Those skink cohorts dropping down. More of the spears are going to be coming in to just try and stay in that fight. The other spears, while they haven't taken a ton of damage, are getting a little bit low on that leadership. Valkia in hot pursuit for that Salon Mage Priest. Definitely that Shredder of Lustry probably wanting to get a little bit more assist and try and free up their lore, because that is one of the big sources of healing for that Shredderification crystal. It has gotten popped off on it, so it's getting a bit more healing. The dwellers below trying to just work their way through all of these Chaos Warriors, but it is just a ton of mobility right now, and there's nothing on the Lizardman side that can really put any pressure whatsoever onto these Marauder Horsemen. They're going to be able to have their time of day firing away, but that Shredder has just done so much work up until this point. Just looking at it, let's see if I can get a little quick look at its value. Well, maybe that's the wrong one, but the Shredder, if we, we'll worry about that later, has been pushed off though. With all of just that sheer volume of fire, we do get a regrowth off, trying to kind of top it off. The Minotaur is just going to continue on, but I mean, all these Marauder Horsemen of Khorne, there is not anything left to really support that Shredder, as Phoenix King is going to be able to pretty much escort it right off the field. These Minotaurs should be able to get peeled off. Even these lowly Skinks should be able to hold their own just long enough to kind of get that Shredder a little bit of space. But even if that Shredder is able to kind of peel get some a little bit room to breathe, because it's going to need some more support. Cold Wind Spear Riders are going to be one of the tickets for the job. They're going to be charging right on forth, trying to charge headlong into those Minotaurs, while the rest of the mobility for the Khorne forces are getting some nice shots in, as these Ripperdactyl Riders are going to be charging in as well against Valky, getting a very nice surround off, kind of holding her in place, and she is just getting munched on very, very quickly here. Her HP bar is just dropping like none other, and down she shall go. Shield the Old Ones as well, trying to help assist on the ground forces, as those Marauder Horsemen trying to just dive in to get a little bit of breathing room for Valky, but she is already done and spent. The Shredder has returned, definitely in need of some major healing. Still has a couple K in terms of HP, and the Cold Wind Spear Riders have been able to peel off those Minotaurs that were in a hot pursuit, and kind of looking probably to eye out these Flesh Hounds. But more Flesh Hounds going to be on the way, trying to get kind of a nice little surround off on these Skinks and Sora Spears, trying to just assist in that regard. But there's just more mobility coming in with these Feral Cold Ones. Should be able to keep these guys out of the picture at least a little bit. Back in the center fold, Valkia been pushed out. Some of the Marauder Horsemen as well getting kind of pushed back. Marauder Horsemen here just going to be kind of beelining it straight for that Shredder, trying to get whatever shots off they can, but they are very, very low. If that Shredder gets any kind of poke damage against those Marauder Horsemen, and that's exactly what these first volleys going to do, should be able to just kind of end away they shall go, and is going to be getting some healing regrowth. Overcast 1.2% per second, and that is going to be able to get that HP up nice and toasty, as it's going to be very much needed back in that front line. And a lot of the units that were initially on the field to deal with it are either preoccupied or have been kind of pushed off over on the point 3. Lizardmen have been able to cap that point. Fresh Hounds are just kind of holding that line, while the Marauder Horsemen of Khorne getting some nice shots into those Cold Wind Spear Riders and those Feral Cold Ones. But Ripperdactyl is going to be kind of flying on over, trying to keep these guys away from the Shredder, who now has a much more respectable amount of HP, over 6k. All that healing definitely needed there, and is able to kind of take point 2 pretty convincingly, while these 1 units of Marauders on the top field, though they do have a little bit of flying forces kind of coming in into their rear, looking to get a nice charge off. And these Ripperdactyl Riders do have that bonus versus infantry, so they should be able to do some pretty decent work if they get a nice rear charge here. But looks like those Ripperdactyl Riders are going to be looking to probably assist the rest of that front line, going after those Marauders. And then on to that far side, that Shredder is just looking to munch on some Bloodletters. Gets a little intercepted by that Cultist, but Cultist takes a massive hit, and already that leadership is almost in the red, and that Shield Old One's going to be popping, just kind of keeping that Shredder alive and well. Definitely going to be needing to do that. But otherwise, things were looking pretty kind of risky for the Lizardmen early on, but right now they have a very good field presence. The only thing on the field for the Khorne forces is just all of the mobility. They have 4 Flesh Hounds right here, so that's quite a bit. but they'll have to kind of go up against quite a bit on the other side. They're not going to be doing too much against the Shredder. We do have one unit of healthy Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes. They're going to be trying to get some shots into that Shredder, but for the most part, their shots kind of going into just some skinks, so definitely a lot of shots wasted there. Feral Cold Ones get rampage into those Flesh Hounds, and they're just going to be getting just removed very, very quickly. Rev Crystal and Shredder, though, are going to be the big problems in a late game. There is no infantry pretty much on the field at all for Khorne, and Lizardmen taking advantage of that and are going to be using their Ripperdact Riders to push back the Marauder Horsemen and just the rest of the Flesh Hounds, just trying to get as much space as possible. And the more time that they get, the more time that they're going to be able to get that Shredder back up to pretty much, I mean, not necessarily full health, but definitely a lot more HP. I think it's got another 2k or so left in the healing reserves. Marauder Horsemen charge in, but they are not doing well at all against these Ripperdact Riders and are getting kind of munched on themselves. Though all these Flesh Hounds, if they can get a nice little surround off, they do have those spears to worry with, but more and more of these Marauder Horsemen of Khorne trying to kind of come into the field. So it's kind of looking very similar in terms of Phoenix King's last army comp, when it's just all mobility in the reserves, and it looks like they may be a little too heavy on that, because there's going to be struggling a bit to kind of take back these points, and they're not going to have really any staying power to deal with that Shredder. Flesh Hounds aren't going to last all too long, so they're going to have to rely very heavily on these Marauder Horsemen. If we're looking at the supplies as well, they might want to try bringing in some Minotaurs, but that's a lot of funds that they're not going to really be able to kind of afford to wait too long against. And Shredder definitely has the space here to get a nice little charge into all these Flesh Hounds. We'll be able to break them pretty quickly. Skink Cohorts can be kind of moving in as well, going to be looking to get some extra shots in, but all these Flesh Hounds able to kind of deal with those Ripperdact Riders, but a very nice Dwellers Below does go off on, and it's just going to be kind of doing a nice bit of damage as the Ripperdact will just kind of charge in one last time, just trying to hold these guys down, and they are forced to kind of move, getting probably a little too close to that Shredder with its aura, and they are going to be routing right off of the field, especially with a terror from that Bastiladon as well. All of these Flesh Hounds just trying to just kind of just get as much damage off and just kind of push these Skink Cohorts back, trying to get some kind of field presence, as they're just trying to shut down all the range possible. That Shredder has just been a terror, though, on the field so far, and has been, which was looked to be almost a very large sink in their funds, is looking to pay off pretty nicely here in this second game. More Marauder Horsemen trying to come in, but that HP is just so high on that Shredder now at this point, still sitting at about 7,000 with room to get a little bit more, and the Shredder looking to just kind of charge right into point one. There is nothing that those Marauders are really going to be able to do much about that, and there isn't anything from Khorne on this side of the field to really kind of put any kind of pressure on. We do have a few units off onto the side that would be nice for the Lizardmen to kind of teleport them out and kind of get some more of those reserves cooking in that reinforcement pool. Chaos Warriors are going to be kind of trying to get in. There is just some Source Warriors that they'll be going up against, so that shield or the high armor from the Chaos Warriors should be able to hold pretty decently. Skink Cohort, though, are going to be kind of looking to get a nice bit of space and are going to be firing point blank range into the backs of those Chaos Warriors, so that Silver Shield not going to be doing a whole lot for them here at that angle. They just need to get a few shots off, and they should generate some very nice value. They get one volley off, but these Flesh Hounds are quick to pounce as they charge right into the flank. But they're going to continue to kind of pluck away and doing quite a bit of damage actually to those Chaos Warriors as more and more units kind of streaming about. But there is just not much on the field, and when you see that damage as well, they are pretty much dead even. But that is also the fact that a lot of that has gone on to that Shredder of Lustria, who is reached its heal cap by the way, so it is now at over 9,000 HP, able to quickly kind of deal with these Marauders. Skinks and all the like should be able to take point one fairly well, and it looks like Lizardmen are doing very nicely indeed in this second game. Mobility just kind of being thrown against the wall from the Phoenix King, as we do have some more Cold One Spear Riders going to be coming in, and they will be able to do very good work at just pretty much cleaning house with all of these Flesh Hounds. Marauder Horsemen do kind of charge in, trying to just get as much off the field as possible. They are charging right into a line of spears, and they're not going to want to stick around too long for that, as the rest of the units kind of break off with these Cold One Spear Riders getting so very close. Yeah, and at this point, I think that is pretty much it. You just bring this Shredder back into that second point, and they should be able to hold very nicely, as they are now going to be sitting at a triple cap, as the Khorne forces bringing in more of those Marauder Horsemen, just trying to get as much skirmish fire as they can. And I'm sure these guys have generated quite a bit, because they've probably been spawned multiple times in this fight, but unfortunately that is not going to be capping you points here in Domination. So it looks like, at least at this stage, Lizardmen are sitting very, very nicely, as more, it's just all mobility coming in from Khorne. They need some kind of backbone to bring in. They brought in one Chaos Warrior, but that got quickly kind of like surrounded and beat down. That Bastiladon able to kind of really do quite well, because it has a ton of armor itself. This thing sits at 140, and yeah, that is going to be Lizardmen for the second game. Going to be forcing a game 3 here. So we'll update that score, and then we'll go over the picks, or go over the after battle report, because that Shredder definitely did some very nice work on that field. Actually, well, I say that it only got 2,500, but that was it was like a big target for Khorne, and they've put so much effort into killing that and were unable to do so. And at that late stage, having all that terror, just the poison from all of its shots, definitely made it very difficult to even kind of get really close at all to it. Rest of the units, the Slann did pretty well with its Dwellers. Vivification Crystal is kind of being there doing some good things. Saurus Spears, rest of the units doing some okay work. Ripperdactyl Riders, on the other hand, they did very well. At least one of them did very well, getting 1,500. The Cold One Spear Riders doing some pretty decent work. Saurus pretty respectable across the board. All the spears able to, especially with the late game, bringing in so much mobility from Khorne. All those spears were just able to trade upwards against pretty much everything that Khorne was throwing up against them. As for the Phoenix King, the Valkia unfortunately did not do too well. She got quickly taken out of that fight by those Ripperdactyl Riders, which is probably where most of their value is from. Minotaurs, Khorne, one able to get 1,800, pretty much all on the Shredder. Unfortunately, by not killing the Shredder, all of that value was pretty much just wasted. It did take that Shredder out of the fight for probably a good few minutes, but in the end it just wasn't enough to completely remove it from the battlefield. That was really kind of what lost it there for Khorne, not having, and at that point, having that terror just roaming the battlefield just did so much work against them. So let's switch back to the main screen, see how both sides are going for their picks, and I'll take a look at the comments as well. Definitely saw a few of those coming through, but was unable to kind of steer my attention that way. Yep, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, the terror in that late game, especially having two sources of that terror. So you had that Bastiladon just staying on point 2 with the Slann, and that Shredder hitting both sides. Not the quickest unit to kind of roam the field with its terror, but it's fast enough, and especially once there wasn't really any threat left to it, and all of that healing that went down to, because it got down to about, I think it was 2.2k was its lowest that it got, and then it was right back up to like 10k by the end of that battle. So all of that healing definitely kept that thing in the fight. So let's see what we have for our picks for the next one. So it's looking like we have Empire Greenskins for our next one. So Leech Lord will be on Empire for the next one. And the Phoenix King is going to be on Greenskins. There we go. Even 1-1 going into that final game. Yeah, that Shredder pick definitely went very well. And I think the throwing axes were definitely a very good tool to use it. I think that the throwing axes got committed to melee almost probably a little too often, because they definitely did not last very long against. The only thing that they would be able to do well against would be like any skinks and stuff. You're going up against Saurus. Those Marauder Horsemen do have a bonus versus infantry, but against like just Saurus, especially Saurus spears, that isn't going to mean a whole lot. And unfortunately, yeah, they got pushed back, and I think probably all of the Marauder Horsemen were probably summoned in at least 2 times a piece. So even though they generated a ton of value on paper, it was definitely not a whole lot of damage well spent. So yeah, on to the next matchup, of course, is Empire and Greenskins. This one is on the Sacred Cenote of Chakwa. So another Lizardmen map. I am not super familiar with this one, though we will see how that does kind of look when we load on in. But Empire Greenskins has been a fun matchup for the most part for kind of going back all the way into Warhammer 2 and I guess even Warhammer 1. But it's a little bit different here. Probably not going to be seeing, let's see, not seeing Volkmar. Definitely not as strong in the domination scene. Having so many funds dedicated to a lord like that generally doesn't pay off all too well. We'll see how that's going to fare. As for the Greenskins, definitely probably a lot more of their similar stuff. Warzag has been a very good one kind of throughout. Azag is another pick that you can bring if you want to put him up onto his Wyvern. You can have some roaming Lore of Death. Isn't bad at all. We'll see how the Wa faces off against Faith and Steel and Gunpowder. Like both sides still got a little way to go before getting their armies fully finalized. Trying to figure out what's best going to work here, especially on a map that looks like we're going to have a little bit of kind of water in the lower fields, but we'll see if it's going to be too much of a downside for either one. Definitely probably would hurt Greenskins to have a little bit, to have all that water. They definitely rely quite a bit on their infantry fight, so we'll see how both armies do end up kind of shaking out. Hopefully everyone's been enjoying the games so far. Last one definitely had some exciting units in it for sure. Phoenix King is ready to go, now just waiting on Leech Lord for his army. Alright, so it looks like we have Leech Lord has at least initially readied up, just switching out what his faction banner is going to be. and we are good to go. So we'll be loaded right on in, and we'll be able to get a nice little sneak peek at what both sides have. So switch on over for Game 3. Empire versus Greenskins. On the Greenskin sides, it is going to be Wurzag and a bunch of, we got goblins, orc boys, savage orcs, and some nice archer line as well. Going to be a very sturdy line on the Greenskin sides, going very heavy on the infantry. On the Empire side, it is going to be Boris Todbringer is going to be the Lord, as we have some, looks like we got some huntsmen, some handgunners, and some state troops to kind of round things off on that side. So here is that map. So it's definitely not quite what I was expecting when I was looking at the map pool. So no water here, it was just a kind of a more open field. Definitely some forest on all fronts though, and some rather large gaping pits, but it's going to be a lizardmen, or at least the lizardmen lands going to be taking center stage, and this actually does look like it might be some water hazards here. We can't quite tell for sure yet. It's definitely going to be hurting the infantry a bit more, but both sides bringing a bunch of that. It's going to be kind of a moot point with both sides suffering those penalties. And as soon as Phoenix King is into the game, we will be able to get underway for kind of going over what the rest of the armies are. So we do have a little causeway, though, between two of the far points. Other 2 points going to be more able to get centrally focused. And it is kind of a long route to take any kind of flank up against that far point 3. And it is a rather, well, not super narrow, but narrow enough that a couple of units will be able to kind of hold this front fairly well. So let's go over the Greenskins first, commanded by the Phoenix King. So Wurzag, he's going to be coming in with Brainburster and Edbutt, and also has the Squiggly Beast and the Bonewood Staff for his 2 items. And as we saw before, it is going to be Orc Era Boys with a bunch of Orc Boys, Savage Orcs, and some Goblins as well for that front line. Yeah, that's pretty much it there. Nothing too special on that front. As for the forces of the Empire, we have Boris Todbringer going to be up in the sky. He does have his Foe Seeker. Bloodroar, he has the White Cloak of Ulrich, kind of reducing the speed and melee attack of those around him, and Crush the Weak, reducing that leadership, melee defense, and melee attack. And the Middenland Runefang, giving himself some nice regen up on his Griffin. Rest forces are some huntsmen, going to be looking to kind of fire away with their own, and they do have some nice stock, so they'll be able to kind of move in and kind of position themselves a little bit better in that way. Now for the rest of the forces, it is going to be Sigmar Sons and Swordsmen in the front line. We have some Spearmen as well, Handgunners, 3 in total, one of which is going to be the Silver Bullets with their magical attacks, and that will definitely help kind of punch through that physical resist of those Savage Orcs and any of the larger units there, but all the huntsmen can be kind of pushed a little forward. But we also are going to be seeing 2 light wizards with Net of Anantox on both of them, as they're going to be looking to just kind of shut down the opposing side. And they are rather cheap, but I think it's only 400 when you have that light wizard on foot, so it is going to be just kind of all in that control, because they definitely have quite a bit of range. And if the Greenskin forces just kind of go straight for the win, they're going to be able to pretty much just overwhelm the Empire forces with what they've got. So they went a lot more heavy on the infantry. They do have some more archers, but the Empire just has so much more to defend, with 6 ranged units in total and a much more expensive lord than what the Greenskins have. So we'll see what the game plan is for both sides. And Wurzag as well, being on his boar, is going to be able to kind of be very mobile, able to get some nice shots off, and especially with these tightly packed formations of those handgunners, Edbutts and Brainbursters both are going to do a number on that square formation. The square formation does allow you to kind of reposition and kind of target more fastly moving units. It is going to play right into the hands of Wurzag, as he's just going to be sitting in the tree line right now, looking to try and get some nice casts off, as here is that first one. And it is going to do a nice bit of damage to those handgunners. Handgunners were on the move, but still that cast is not very long whatsoever, so a well-placed shot is going to be able to put a nice cut into their HP, as the handgunner or the huntsmen do kind of open fire, but being in the trees, he's going to be able to kind of block most of those incoming fire, as the rest of the Greenskin wad just continues to march its way right on forward, and they are going to probably just continue to just kind of push right on through. Not much going to be holding on it. We only have 3 units on this side to kind of hold back against for the huntsmen and the handgunners, and there is much more infantry on the greenskin sides than that. So Boris is going to have his work cut out for him, kind of roaming the battlefield, trying to just kind of leadership bomb everywhere that he goes and kind of break the more lower in leadership greenskins. And a second brain burst that goes right into these handgunners, and that is going to be doing a lot of damage. They're already kind of causing them to rout off without taking any counterfire in return. All that spell casting, and one of those units is off the field already. Greenskins going very wide. We do have 1 unit up on the top field, so we'll take a little look, kind of spin our way up there. We just have 1 goblin can be taking that 0.3 uncontested, so we'll be able to kind of get some nice safe cap on that. Boris in the tree is going to be looking to take out Warzag early on. Now the only thing here with the greenskin army is there isn't really a whole lot to deter Boris. We do have some squigs can be kind of coming through the trees, and they will be able to kind of at least use their mass to an extent to try and hold Boris back, but in terms of damage, they're not going to be doing too much against him. These guys are anti-infantry units, not so much anti-large. Now in the center ranks, it looks like we're going to be getting an overcasted net, as it is going to be kind of pinning down these goblin wolf riders. Definitely needed as these outriders. That is going to allow them to just kind of turn and fire, and all these units just kind of just turning about, and they are just lighting up these goblin wolf riders, and they are going to be off the field very, very quickly, though they are taking a lot of return fire from these orc air boys. Going to be getting their shots in themselves. On to the other far flank, greenskins still have plenty of units. We have Durkat squigs and night goblin squig hoppers going to be looking to kind of thread that needle, going right into those juicy range units, as we already have those savage orcs, but they just get lit right up by those handgunners, and they are trying desperately to get onto these huntsmen, but it looks like they might be able to kind of get pushed back. We do have some more units with these Knights of the Blazing Sun, a lot more elite units, and they're going to be a kind of thorn in the side, especially these Durkat squigs are going to be struggling mightily against them, as they're going to be very good at dealing with all the infantry, but with those Knights of the Blazing Sun kind of charging on forward, they should be able to quickly deal with those savage orcs and kind of sweep right on back through, trying to kind of get into the range units, and those orc air boys are just doing a number, being kind of uncontested so far. Silver Bullets trying to light up Warzag, but the wall does go off, and that is going to be giving everything a nice bit of buff to their just the weapon damage, melee attack, all that stuff, as they charge right on forward. And Warzag just kind of sitting there and taking these shots from the Silver Bullets, and he is getting very, very low. A brain burst does go off. Oh, that does a ton of damage, taking off 50% of their HP, but Warzag is very, very low, and a net does go, and Boris would very much like to get on top of Warzag, though he's being a little bit preoccupied by these squig herds, trying to free up these Silver Bullets one more time. And I think actually it looks like Warzag did get teleported on out of the field, and so at least kind of saving the greenskins from the leadership penalty of losing him, which is definitely a good heads-up play by the Phoenix King, because with that, the leadership definitely would have been a bit more of a problematic thing for them, as that is definitely one thing that the greenskin faction itself does struggle against. But as of right now, greenskins do hold all 3 points right now, and they have been able to push the Empire forces back a pretty considerable amount. However, with the loss of Warzag, at least for the time being, he isn't too expensive to bring back, so we might not be too surprised to see him returning to the field. But Boris is just going to be a menace, just roaming through the battlefield, hitting those orc air boys, trying to kind of free things up. Light Wizard isn't necessarily going to be in a good spot. Those squig herd should actually be able to deal with this Light Wizard pretty easily with their bonus versus infantry, but these Knights of the Blazing Sun are going to be kind of getting in to those squigs, as we have the grenade launchers kind of getting some of their own shots into the other squigs, just trying to kind of thin the tide of the greenskins. But Boris, he isn't going to be able to do much in terms of cap weight, so he's going to be just trying to kind of just eliminate all of the threats, though. And in terms of infantry, the Empire forces definitely are going to be needing. We do have some spearmen kind of coming forward. Knights of the Blazing Sun should help to try and kind of cap. On the far point, we actually do have some units kind of coming in. Some Free Company militia vanguarded in is going to be trying to take that far point, as those goblins are going to be kind of rotating down towards point 2. Not going to be seeing those Free Company militia come in, so that'll definitely kind of stem the bleeding a little bit, because the Empire definitely is going to be looking to get a bit more on that point department. They are running out of time pretty quickly without a single point to their name so far. Some Orc Arrow Boys going to be charging in as well, kind of against the just all of the Empire forces on this point, and that is definitely a much thinner Empire force on this field. There isn't much in terms of heavy hitters left, pretty much just state troops on that front, as the squigs and all of the mobility. This has pretty much been something we've seen from the Phoenix King in all three of his matches, where he just brings a ton of mobility in the late game. And for the first game and this game, it seems to be paying off very, very well. It didn't go quite so well in that second game, but at this point, it is just pretty much relentless assault against the Empire's positions, and just not letting them have any room to breathe, as they just continue to hit and just kind of break apart any of the reinforcements that kind of come into the field. As you kind of look back on the far side, unfortunately, those Orc Air Boys are going to be charging into the Free Company Militia, who do try and kind of sneakily cap point 3, but those Orc Boar Boys are just going to be charging right forward. They're going to get that wad just as they charge in, and that is going to pretty much be the end of those Free Company Militia on that front. And Squigs doing very well, eliminating any of the range forces that are trying to kind of come in. And at this point, that damage is just kind of in that runaway territory now. The only real danger on the field is Boris, and he can only be in one spot at a time, so just drowning him in squigs and just other units is going to be pretty much the way to go for the Greenskins from this point on. And I think that is pretty much just going to be it. I don't see any way for the Empire forces to really kind of get back into this. They are going to be throwing some spears into these Orc Boar Boys, and they should be able to do some decent damage if those Boar Boys stay engaged, but that is just 1 point of 3 that they are going to need, and I just don't see any way of kind of bringing this back. The Greenskins have way too much on the field, and they're going to be able to just continue to push the Empire farther and farther back. And if you look at the field, the only thing left is Boris. We have a Light Wizard there. That one's been routed off, and we just have 1 unit of spears up on the high ground, but they are going to be getting worked on pretty well, and they are a long way from assisting the rest of the forces. And there's just nothing else on the field right now. All of the supplies have been used for the Empire, so there isn't really anything left to kind of bring things back. We do have some these Intler's Reichsguard going to be coming in to deal with those, but yeah, that is pretty much going to be all she wrote. Yeah, there's yeah, definitely the nets were probably too far between. They definitely needed, probably, Empire also was probably a little bit too spread out. You had a Light Wizard in at both of the points trying to assist, but if nets was your big idea to go, I think that there wasn't enough of a follow-up. They were able to bring down Wurzeg, but unfortunately, yeah, that was pretty much the best benefit that those nets had. Rest of the units, I mean, just all these Boar Boys, Savage Orcs, everything just tore apart that frontline units for the Empire, and there's all these Orc Air Boys as well, just kind of continuing. But this was really pretty much the game plan for Phoenix King for each of the battles so far, was bring just tons and tons of mobility. So right here we have these Broken Tusk Mobs, we have Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, we have Orc Boar Boys, and we have just a bunch of squigs, and like all of the squigs here doing some pretty decent work overall. Nothing too ridiculous, but it's just, yeah, just so much pressure and so much quick adaptable pressure as well, that they're just able to kind of be wherever they needed them. And then once that front line of the Empire was broken, there was no way they were going to be able to bring that back. Silver Bullets did very well, but otherwise, yeah, just everything else, not really much. And Boris, unfortunately, unable to really generate any kind of good value on his end. Yeah, that's all she wrote, as Phoenix King will be advancing in the bracket into the finals. And we'll take a little peek to see how that goes. I'll kind of drop a message. And see where they're at. His F-Pod is currently fighting Pinkamena. And it looks like, I'll just kind of do a little refresh, see if they are still fighting. It does look like that is the case, so we'll see if we can hop into their last game, or they might be currently playing, in which case we'll just kind of hang out here and wait for that to finish up. Alright, well, we have sent off messages. We'll see if we get any responses soon, but they might be in a game right now. So yeah, we'll just have to kind of sit tight, relax, and wait until we got ourselves either probably most likely a game 3, or we'll be going right into the finals for our next set of games. So yeah, in the meantime, sit tight, and we will be back as soon as we can. Looks like we still haven't had any response just yet from FPod or Pinkamena. But I hope everyone has had a good New Year's, and so we're looking forward to, I guess, the rest of, or the upcoming year. Hopefully I have some good new content for Warhammer 3. I know Chaos Dwarves are definitely one of the, I guess, more anticipated upcoming DLCs, even though there hasn't been any official announcement. Any official stuff for a new DLC sounds like it's going to be around that February timeframe when they might kind of give us a little bit of insight on what's coming for the upcoming year or years for Warhammer 3. I don't know if anyone has any, I guess, guesses on stuff beyond that. I definitely have some stuff I'd like to hope that they'll add. Well, looks like we will be able to get into Game 3 of FPod versus Pinkamena. And so get into at least a little action. They are now tied 1-1. Soon as actually, there we go. All right, so let's update. So we don't know what they played for their first two. It's looking like it might be Demons versus Empire for Game 3. So let's update all of our text fields real quick. So we got Pinkamena on, I guess, the home field. FPod on the other. And I am just going to assume it is Empire for FPod and Demons for Pinkamena. Unless that was what they had just finished up doing. All right, well, I'm going to assume that it's Doc versus Empire, unless told otherwise. Though it looks like it is still on the last map. Yeah, they may not have updated yet, so that may have been the last series was Doc versus Empire. I will just have to wait and see if we get a... They might just be going through their picks and bans for our next one. But in the meantime, we'll sit tight. We should be into a game here before too long then. Alright, so actually Doc and Empire was game 2. In game 3, looks like we have F-Pod on Grand Cathay, and it'll be Norska for Pinkamena. So I have been told this matchup goes both... Well, I feel like Grand Cathay can do quite well against Norska. I have also been told Norska does quite well into Grand Cathay. So we'll see how it is going to kind of shake out in this one. So we'll just update Pinkamena to Norska. And F-Pod will be on Grand Cathay. I know F-Pod definitely prefers his Empire faction, is probably his go-to, so no surprise to be seeing him on Grand Cathay. A fairly similar overall, well, not super familiar, but it's got a lot of similarities between the two factions in terms of just the units they have available to them, the mobility and the like. It is not too far of a jump to go from Empire to Cathay and vice versa. Oops, I put in that last one wrong. It's Norska. There we go. At least that's the information we have so far. Not sure what they played in Game 1, but we know what they had in Game 2 and in our final game of this semifinal. So should be some exciting stuff. Kind of expecting, probably, Norska has definitely been, I mean, their playstyle kind of lends more towards bringing in a lot of infantry, because most of their infantry trades very well into your opponent's side. Champions have been able to do quite well, though with so much range that the forces of Cathay can bring, that is definitely going to be probably one of the things that they're going to struggle with. At least back in Warhammer 2, Norska would very much struggle against a very wide ranged build. Most of their stuff, they might have some pretty decent armor in terms of like their front line, so like their champions are going to have 80 armor, but they only have bronze shields. And I mean, a lot of your really good units, like your berserkers and stuff that can really chew through that front line, is going to be pretty much unshielded, 15 armor or at best, so you're not going to be able to do too much, and any of their range stuff isn't going to necessarily have the range to get into Cathay. So if Cathay is going to be able to get nice and set up, it's going to be pretty hard for Norska to kind of push through. So Norska, to do that, is going to have to rely a lot more on their monstrous units. And they're not going to be able to kind of go in all guns blazing right off the get-go. I think Norska definitely is going to be wanting to kind of wait and kind of get a lot of their kind of heavy hitters in. So stuff like the trolls, skin wolves, manticores, anything that can kind of push through that front line as quickly as they can. In the meanwhile, they're going to have to try and be a little bit more cautious at kind of keeping most of their front line alive. But that's kind of going to be a little bit of a double-edged sword, because Cathay is going to, they themselves are going to benefit more from getting more and more set up. They're going to be able to get more ranged units in and just kind of really kind of solidify their position that way. But we'll see if that's going to be the case in this fight. It looks like both sides are almost ready to go. Looks like F-Pod's army is set and Pinkamena is almost ready. Might be good to go. Just a few funds remaining, and we will be getting into our next game after just that slight delay between our last series and this one. So F-Pod is good. Now we're just waiting for Pinkamena to hit ready up, and we will be underway. All right, and we are loading on in. And here is that sneak peek at what both sides have. So for Pinkamena, we have a Wolfric, we have a Thimir Balefine of Shadows, looks like just Pit of Shades, a couple of Norscan Ice Trolls, some Hunters, a bunch of Marauders with great weapons, and then some regular Marauders to kind of round things off. So just quite a few of that frontline units. As for Cathay, we're going to be seeing a Dragon-Blooded Shogun Lord, as well as a Fire Rain Rocket, which is going to do a lot of work to the frontline infantry, though they don't have any really good units to fire in. There's no champions or something or anything like that. And then there's also just a lot of trees on this map in general, so it's going to be a little bit harder to get some very good value, but it is going to be very hard to get on top of that. There isn't really going to be any really good routes to kind of flank. It is going to be pretty much just relying on either trying to get a Manticore in, maybe a good Pit of Shades could also kind of shake things up. And as soon as both sides are loaded in, we kind of finish going through both sides of the armies. But otherwise, from Cathay, looks like they had just a bunch of Jade Warriors. We had some crossbows as well. And I'm trying to remember. Oops. Now that's unfortunate. So we had Pinkamena ended up dropping there, so we'll get her back in. Took a quick little screen cap of the armies, so we shouldn't have to wait too long to get things loaded back in. Fortunately, sometimes things like this happens, I think this was a fresh lobby, so we shouldn't have had any issues with that. But a little bit more patience, and we'll get right back into that fight. Oops, I just realized well, yes, it was showing the armies, but both sides would have been seeing that. Alright, we got Pinkamena back in the lobby. She just have to quickly rebuild that army that she had before. And hopefully it won't be too long before we get right back in. And hopefully no more hiccups like that. Alright, looks like we're good to go. Same armies as before. And hopefully the connection gods are on our side this time around. Switch back to that screen as you kind of get a look into what both sides have, as we were just about to go through that. So yeah, Cathay has that Fire Rain rocket with triple crossbows, 5 Jade Warriors, and 3 Peasant Spearmen. And then, of course, again, against all of the Marauders of the Norskin Horde with their 2 Ice Trolls, Wulfric, and that Fimir Balefine of Shadows. So yeah, the only real concern with that Cathay army is going to be just the availability for that Fire Rain rocket to get any good shots in. We are now both loaded in, or all 3 of us are loaded in now, it looks like. There we go. And we are good. So for Pinkamena on the Norskin side, we have, I'm going to hide this for a sec, so Wulfric the Wanderer, as he does have a Seafang, Fighter Die, as well as Hunter of Champions. And then we have that Fimir Balefine, which just has the Pit of Shades. Going to be looking to try and kind of just open up some holes into the Cathay roster. Otherwise, it's just From the Mist and Arcane Conduit. And we did see all of the rest before, so it's just a bunch of Marauders with great weapons. And then we have 2 of the Ice Trolls and a unit of the Hunters. Going to be looking to try and get into that backline. Cathay is going to be electing to take that high ground and just kind of probably slowly walk their way down that causeway. It is going to allow them to be a little bit more protective with all of their units. So they are going to be having a bunch of Jade Warriors and those Peasant Long Spearmen. And then we are going to have just all of the Jade Warriors crossbowmen. The Dragon-Blooded Lord going to be coming in with Storm of Shadows, reducing that speed, helping to just kind of give them a little bit more breathing room when Norse does come in hot and heavy. Ancestral Warriors and Talons of Night for the spells. Also Arcane Conduit and Jade Amulet for the items, and that is pretty much going to wrap things up. Now, being up on this hill can bring everything back into screen, is going to allow that Fire Rain rocket to have a very nice view of the rest of the field. The only thing is you are putting all of your forces way up here, and it is quite a long stretch to go all the way down to points 1 and 2. but they will have a very good position in the meantime, and it's going to be very hard for Norska to really kind of try and break their way through, and it's probably going to be best to kind of try and slow down the Cathay advance, because they have nothing on that lower ground. They have nothing to really kind of put any pressure at this time, and that's still going to allow, though, Norska to use their reinforcement points up on this hill to put that pressure in on point 3, especially once Cathay is pretty much fully looking down that hill. Is going to be when Norska is going to want to start putting some backline pressure on them, force Cathay to kind of look two ways and just kind of slow them down for as long as they can, because they're going to be having that point control, and that's going to be probably where Norska is going to be taking this, is in that department. They're not going to be, or it's going to be very hard for them to try and beat that Cathay army on the battlefield just with the position that Cathay is going to be taking. But yeah, Cathay is going to have a very long, slow hike down that hill. And in the meantime, that Dragon-Blooded Lord is going to be pretty much on a scouting mission, looking through these trees, just make sure there's no nasty surprises that can harm their beautiful army. And finding nothing, is going to be returning back to the rest of their forces, and these fire rain rockets are going to be setting up momentarily down that hill. Things going just a little bit slow to kind of start things off. And I did hear that was kind of a issue in their second game, not so much their first, so hopefully things kind of smooth themselves out just a bit. Norska at this point pretty much just is going to be kind of setting themselves up around point 2. They have a few units going to be looking to hold just some marauders. We also have those marauder hunters as well, are going to be kind of taking that side of the field, and some great weapons. So they have enough. They don't need to put everything they have, and they probably don't want to, because that's just going to allow now that fire rain rocket to get some very nice shots, even though that first one pretty much landed on all sides of the infantry, not making a whole lot of headway against all of the Norskan infantry. But the shots are going to continue to rain down, and there is going to be nothing that can put any concernable pressure on those units, at least from the Norskan side, anytime soon. They do have some units like manticores and stuff and try and weasel their way through, but they have so many other ranged units on the fields. We also have some more units kind of scrolling on in, some more just Jade Warriors, and some peasant archers coming in for F-Pod up on that front, just putting in more volume of fire to kind of focus the way down. Norska does take points 1 and 2 while taking point 1. They have point 2, and Grand Cathay is going to be commanding point 3 for the time, so the clock is going to start ticking. Norska has plenty of reinforcements here. They're just going to be kind of waiting, because the longer they wait here, they don't need to bring a ton onto the field. They want to kind of that's going to be able to allow them to react. No, they don't want to wait too long, but that's going to be able to bring a bunch of forces up onto this hill. They have a regular reinforcement and a vanguard, so they'll be able to, especially now that Cathay is moving with quite a few of their units down this field. There is still a decent amount. We have peasant long spearmen, and we also have some Jade Warriors with halberds, which will be a very nice tool against any skin wolves or any other quick mobility, such as ice wolves, that can want to bring their way in. Well, the fire rain rocket, at this point, Norska almost could just take all of this incoming fire. They're not going to be generating a ton of value with that fire rain rocket. They'll be getting a decent amount of kills, do a lot of HP damage, but the marauders are definitely not going to be the critical thing. Now, if these were champions, that would be maybe a different story, but yeah, just 400 costing marauders, not going to be the end of the world if Norska loses a few of them in this fight. We kind of take a look at that fire rain rocket. Only has about 300 value so far, and has used up a decent amount, maybe about a third of its ammunition in total. So overall, it's still not going to be quite paying for itself, though it's pretty much just kind of, but the rest of the army is just kind of slow pushing. It is going to be kind of preventing Norska from getting any real headway. All of the Jade Warrior Crossbowmen going to start opening up on to Wolfric, kind of getting a little bit of damage in against him. But for the most part, he's going to be able to kind of keep on his horse and just stay mobile, kind of making sure most of those shots just kind of land harmlessly amongst the grass. One of the marauders has been pushed back from that fire rain rocket, and just continues to just kind of pepper away at them on the retreat. but that is pretty much what Norska is going to be doing at this point, is just kind of weathering the storm, at least for the time being. Though a nice Pit of Shade is going to be dropping right into these Jade Warrior crossbowmen, and that is going to be doing a nice bit of damage, and it is going to also be disrupting them, at least for now, and taking off a good chunk of their HP, about 50% and ticking. So that is going to be getting very close to almost just outright breaking that one unit, as the rest of the Cathay forces are going to be starting to push more aggressively now down to point 2. And the thing is, Norska has quite a few of these units off into the field and a ton of supplies still sitting there, so Cathay is continuing to bring in more and more units, and Norska has 4k supplies that they can bring in at this point. And with, I think Norska is thinking that Cathay would just kind of sit and wait while they were just kind of fired away at Norska, but now at this point Norska is in a bit of a predicament because they don't have much on the field right now, and that is going to allow Cathay to really push pretty hard in, and I think Cathay kind of sees that in their advantage, and we are now starting to see some of those reinforcements start to come in over on here, as both of those Feral Manticores are going to be kind of coming onto the field, but they are coming in on the backside of their army, looking to only support that front, not putting any pressure on the rear. And that's still quite a few units still left on the field, as Wolfric and that Vimir Balefiend are going to be looking to kind of hold off the tide of all these Jade Warriors, as the crossbowmen are lighting up that front line. Rest of the unit kind of coming in. All of these crossbowmen and archers are going to do a number onto the great weapons, because they have absolutely no shields whatsoever. The rest of the units charging on forward and going to be trying to break through and do as much damage as they can, while these Norscan ice trolls still being patient off into the trees, trying to avoid any incoming fire. But now is going to be a good time where they do have a few avenues to kind of try and push forward. But a nice Talons of Night going to be trying to catch a few of them out in the trees, but seeing that cast being dropped, most of them are able to kind of pull their way out of the range of that spell, only taking marginal damage in the meantime. And a very nice boast goes right through these Jade Warriors and those Peasant Long Spearmen, doing a nice bit of damage, breaking those Spearmen and essentially breaking both of them in the meanwhile. And that is going to open up another avenue, and a nice Pit of Shades is going to be going off as well. It's going to be hopefully taking out 2 of these units, going right into the meat of it, should break one of them, and doing a nice bit of damage to the other, while the rest of the Norscan forces, still nothing coming in on that top front, but all of it is going to be streaming through on the bottom, just trying to hold back Cathay from just kind of streaming in through point 2. And the damage value right now isn't too ridiculous, and none of that damage from that Pit of Shade is actually being counted towards Norska. So Norska is actually doing a lot better than what is shown on that damage. But still, Cathay kind of seems like that initial assault is kind of fading fairly quickly. They may have been a little too gung-ho about trying to take that, and now that they're missing a lot of their frontline units, there's a lot less to kind of hold back these Marauders and these Norseman Ice Trolls. So this is actually a really good timing here for all of these units to kind of start pushing forward. We have these Feral Manticores are now going to be able to start putting pressure where they need to. Jade Lanterns are going to be kind of coming in looking to try and intercept these Norscan Ice Trolls, as they take quite a bit of damage from all of these crossbowmen, and these Iron Hail Gunners really would like to kind of turn around and get some shots in, but they're being pushed back by all these trolls and these Marauders, as more units are just trying to kind of stem or filter their way through and just trying to intercept all of these units that Norska is trying to throw up that hill. But most of it is being held back. These Jade Warrior crossbowmen getting some nice shots into some unsupported Norscan Ice Trolls. Now, the Norscan Ice Trolls are holding fairly well for now, but they definitely would like some support. And now here comes the rest of the mobility, as the Norscan forces are going to start making their way up this hill. And we are now starting to see some of the first units, some Norscan Warhounds going to coming in, looking to try and get into that back line. But in the meantime, all of that, the Iron Rocket has used up all of its ammunition, as the Feral Manticore kind of starts charging in and might be able to land, and just before it does, that Fire Rain is able to kind of pull back. It actually would have been pretty beneficial for that Feral Manticore to dive on top of that Fire Rain rocket if it could have kept it on the ground, do some damage, and just provide less refund for Grand Cathay in the meantime. Another nice Pit of Shades can be dropping down on top of these Jade Warrior crossbowmen, so the spellcasting has been really well, really good for Norska so far. Pit of Shades, all of their Sea Fangs have done very, very well. Ice Wolves kind of jumping on top of these Iron Hail Gunners and shutting stuff down pretty well here in the late stage. The Dragon-Blooded Lord trying to stop these Norscan Warhounds from getting into their back line, but Norska has had a very good engagement so far in this fight. even though they seem to be down fairly much in terms of overall damage value, but still a lot of the Cathay units have gotten are either compromised right now or are just not able to kind of get any good value generated on their end, and more units are now going to start kind of coming in for Norska, though their infantry department is getting rather thin themselves. A lot of their funds right now is in their monstrous units, their Feral Manticore, who are now being attacked by these Ancestral Warriors, which will do a very good job against them, and especially against the low leadership Norscan Ice Trolls. That unit of Ancestral Warriors should be able to at least kind of free things up a little bit for the Cathay forces, especially these Iron Hail Gunners. They really much want to get a little bit more space. They kind of start firing away. The Terror has set into those Norscan Ice Trolls, and they are going to be trying to get out of that engagement, though they're kind of a little confused on which way they're going to be wanting to try and Terror route off. But in the flip side, that Feral Manticore is going to be trying to kind of keep all of these Jade Lancers at bay from kind of streaming down the rest of the hill. Cathay still completely focusing on that top field, and they're kind of forced right now to be bringing in more of their halberds, their spears, all of it kind of just trying to bring more units to kind of just throw in the way of the Norscan forces. Norscan Ice Trolls kind of come, actually these are the Miststalkers, the Fimir Warriors, so they'll be kind of coming in as well. A fairly strong unit, lots of armor, and they do have some nice armor piercing, armor sundering, so we'll be able to do pretty decently against those Jade Lancers, especially in assistance with those Norscan Ice Wolves. That armor sundering will allow those Ice Wolves to do quite well. But in come some of the heavy hitters for Cathay, as we have the Righteous Lancers, the Great Longbow Riders, going to be diving down against the Norskins. Now these guys going to be able to get some decent work in. They do have some armor piercing and will be able to assist their lord, but in the meantime they get dropped a very nasty Pit of Shades right on top of that Feral Manticore, and is hoping to kind of try and pull in as many of these Lancers as they can, though most of them are able to take flight and avoid most of that incoming fire, though it still will be able to break these Jade Warriors and hopefully kind of free up more space against these Iron Hill Gunners, who are firing downhill against those Marauders with great weapons, doing a nice bit of work, but they are going to be kind of pulled back, so they may accidentally be on skirmish mode from the looks of things. I think they would have liked to get another volley or two in if they can, but now the Lancers are going to be able to have a little bit more leeway, as that Pit of Shades is going to be on cooldown. And a Talon of Night going to be dropped on these approaching Marauders, going to be trying to keep them at bay as well and hold them in place, just allowing again for all their range units to get some good shots in, as more of these Iron Hill Gunners farther up the hill are now going to be getting some nice crossfire, firing down range, though more and more of these Norscan units are just trying to force their way up, and both sides just finding units again and again to throw against the other side. And Cathay, though, is just slowly mounting that damage advantage more so and more so, and you just see all these fresh units kind of coming in. More Jade Lancers, we have more Iron Hill Gunners as well going to be coming in, and not a whole lot to put a ton of pressure on, though we do have some Marauders and some Skin Wolves going to be kind of coming in from the top, as these Jade Lancers are going to be kind of rotating around to kind of head them off. Jade Warriors with halberds as well will be excellent tools, as Cathay continues to try and push farther in. They still have a bit more time to kind of work with. They're not in that much of the danger zone just yet, but they're Cathay definitely isn't a faction that is known for their fast push into enemy territory, so they are going to have to be very mindful of that, even though the battle seems to be going very, very well for them so far. But if they can remove that Fimir Veil Fiend, which it looks like they're just about to do, a nice hit by that Dragonblood Lord, and that is going to cause that unit to rout, though not before it gets one more Pit of Shades off right on top of these Iron Hail Gunners, and that is going to be a very nice cast that could not have been any better placed against them. But that is pretty much going to be it for the spell casting. I think we do have one more Sea Fang coming in from Wolfric at some point, but for the meantime he has dropped the Hunter of Champions on top of that Dragon-Blooded Lord as he is trying to get engaged on him, but unfortunately the caster does fall, but he is able to get some nice hits in return against that Dragon-Blooded Lord. He still has that Hunter Champion on top, so reducing that armor and melee defense, but the Dragon-Blooded Lord is able to kind of pull things back with those Jade Lancers kind of holding Wolfric back, and into the sky she does go. We do have some Jade Lancers, though, kind of getting into the back door a little bit, though there's plenty of Norscan units left here, and they're going to be starting to push back down into these Jade Lancers. It definitely does not want to be losing out on that point, and Cathay definitely needs to start kind of putting more pressure, and that's exactly what they're going to be doing a little bit of for having some Peasant Long Spearmen. It's like they are just running out of time now at this point. They are sitting in a rather dangerous spot. They only have 500 points left for Norsca to go, while they only have 500 to their own name. And Norsca is starting to put a, not necessarily like a threatening amount of pressure onto that top point, but enough where it is going to divert Cathay long enough, or at least Norsca hopes that it's going to be long enough, because right now their bottom field is in a lot worse position, as like the Icehorn Marauders, all these units are now kind of pulling back down to 2, because there's no way they're going to be forcing their way up that hill anytime in this game. Dragon-Blooded Lord is going to try diving down on top of Wolfric, try and jump on top of him, as he does have that Storm of Shadow, so that's minus 45% speed. He does pop that Fight or Die to increase that melee attack and leadership, but with all of these units, especially those Righteous Lancers, if they kind of turn around, they're going to be able to pin Wolfric in very well. And even though that Dragon-Blooded Lord is no real duelist, Wolfric is very low himself. Those Lancers have instead elected to kind of charge into those Marauders instead, just kind of hoping that their own Lord is going to be able to handle Wolfric fairly well, and they might just be able to do just that, of kind of spin out these Skin Wolves. Would very much like to kind of get off these Jade Lancers and kind of start putting in more pressure on the range units, but this isn't necessarily out of the fight for Norsca, even though that damage value is kind of ridiculous. It is almost a 2-to-1 at this point, but still Norsca is holding on to 2 points. They have Marauders on both of those, so that is going to be really their only way that Norsca is going to win, is by points. And Cathay is probably a little bit into that panic route where they need to start putting a lot more pressure onto these lower points. And Norsca is just holding just ever so long enough, and Wolfric able to survive that gooning attempt onto him, but at this point he's not exactly much more than a leadership bastion for Norsca, though he does, I think he should still have one more boat left in him, and I think he's just kind of waiting either for the right moment, or maybe I missed that last one, as Cathay is just going to be trying to ignore as many of these Marauders as they can and start just charging down into 2. They need to slow that timer down as much as they can, because there is not much time left. They do have some of the missed doctors, but they're so very low. I think at this point you might need to just kind of bring these guys out and get as much funds back as you can, and kind of just turtle your way up onto point 1. And just throw enough into the Cathay forces to kind of slow them down as they kind of drive down. Yep, Spellbound. Yeah, Cathay is definitely probably spent a bit too much time. Well, yeah, at some point they will have to triple cap. But Norsca just keeps throwing in enough units to tie down, because right now, if you look up onto this field, we have 2 units of Skin Wolves and 1 unit of Marauder Great Weapons, but that is essentially tying down like 6 or 7 different units for Cathay, and just making it so less and less can get put down onto these lower points. But Cathay finally is able to kind of take point 2. So that is going to stem the bleeding. It is not going to stop the bleeding, because they still have too many points to catch up. So at some point, Cathay is going to need to push into this far point, and right now, if Norsca doesn't respond and they don't have anything in the vicinity to do just that, these Jade Lancers are going to be able to break these Marauders and are able to at least start capping, if even very, very slowly. But Norsca is kind of pulling all of their units into this fight. So we got Skin Wolves who will be able to definitely break down those Jade Lancers fairly well, but but they're just going to need to get stuff over there as quickly as they can, as Cathay have finally really just kind of cracked that egg here on point 2 and just driven back anything that had been in the vicinity. But it was a long and bloody fight to get to that point. This battlefield is just strewn with the bodies of dead Cathayans and Norskins alike. And Cathay just continues to starting to stream in as they have peasant horsemen just trying to get cap weight over onto this far point, and Norska is just throwing everything that they can. At this point, they just probably need to bring in as much mobility as they can and hold things off of this point. These two marauders I don't think are going to even be able to get onto this point, as Cathay is going to be able to either just kind of pull them back, but kind of in the same breath, all of the range units from Cathay, they're not going to be a whole lot of help trying to get onto point 1. So, I mean, Norska doesn't have a whole lot of supplies left in them, and they don't have a whole lot of more units, so it's really just this one unit of skin wolves that is going to have to try and hold point 1 for Norska here. Otherwise, because as soon as Norska loses any of these points, there is no way that they're going to be able to try and cap this back onto that top point. All of the Norscan forces with one skin wolf still around, but that's not going to be enough to really do a whole lot. It is going to come down to this engagement over here and how long Norska can hold. They're throwing Norscan warhounds are being brought in to try and just stem that bleeding, because now it is just kind of just slowly shifting that balance on this point farther and farther into Cathay's favor. And those skin wolves are just not holding for as long as they want. They are taking a lot of damage. That dragon-blooded lord definitely is being able to help, but a nice rear or a nice charge in to maybe hopefully bolster these skin wolves. But those skin wolves getting a little too low, they are able to kind of start to maintain that point. But as soon as these skin wolves end up routing, that is pretty much going to be curtains for Norska, as these two forces trying to come in to support are being held back by a single peasant long spearman who is able to kind of just at least kind of get in just a little bit to slow these guys down. And Norska, while they are still holding point 1, I don't see that this well, as I say, that these peasants horsemen themselves are very close to routing, just as the skin wolves are. And this is going to be that fight that is going to decide this match. Everything else on the field pretty much not a factor anymore. All of these crossbowmen, iron hail gunners, these crossbowmen might get in range to actually do a little bit of damage, but the skin wolves are the first unit to break, and with that, the rest of the units from Cathay are going to kind of surge forward and are going to get a nice little bit of leadership boost from that. And with the skin wolves gone, there is not a whole lot of forces close by, and we have some units kind of returning as more of these Jade Warriors are going to start coming into that fight, and more of these Jade Lancers are going to be charging forward. But still, there's only 200 points left to go. But Norska is just trying to hold on by the skin of their teeth. And yeah, these Jade Lancers just trying to throw everything this way and that to hold on. The skin wolves, I think, have been fully pushed off the field there, so they are no longer a factor. But unfortunately, I think Norska may have came so very close, but that just that damage differential is going to be just a little bit too much for them to overcome. The more, well, I keep thinking that Cathay is on the verge of just putting so much pressure onto this point that Norska is going to be unable to hold it back, but they're just holding out just long enough. Peasant long spearmen are going to be coming in, but at the same time we have the Beast of Tashnar, which might actually be able to just finish off these Jade Lancers. We have these Marauders with great weapons are going to be kind of coming in as well, though the rest of these Marauders, they are not, well, it is going to be very close one way or the other if Norska is going to be able to hold this or not. These Jade crossbowmen are not even bothering with that damage anymore. They are just trying to put as many units as they can into this point as possible. These Norscan warhounds are back in the fight, and these peasant horsemen are going to be just a little too late to try and hold them off that field. Marauders will be trying to force path their way on as well, but that is getting closer and closer to a Cathay capture, and there is not any pressure on any of the other points. So this is Norska's do or die position. They are getting so very close of just kind of looking at what they have. And actually, that loss of the Lord at this juncture might just be enough, because they're going to be getting that leadership penalty from their Lord recently dying, causing these Warhounds to break. And that is going to be it, as Cathay finally caps point 1. Very, very close for Norska, but with what's on the field, yep, that is going to be it. And F-Pod will be advancing to the finals. So a very close finish there. Norska almost was able to kind of slow Cathay down just enough. I'm going to take a look at the value. Wolfric did very well at 2,500. The Fimir Balefiend 21. Now the rest of the units, unfortunately, both the Norse and Ice Wolves, not a whole lot. And then the rest, well, some of the Marauders with great weapons did pretty decent work. The Miststalkers, on the other hand, did not, only 228. Skinwolves did all right. Yeah, not a whole lot of value generated with the rest of the army. As for Grand Cathay, the Dragon-Blooded Lord did pretty well, and the Fire Raven Rocket actually was able to punch over 1,300, even though for the most part it was only firing into Marauders for most of that fight. Then just kind of quickly cycling through the rest of the forces. The Jade Lancers, on the other hand, did very, very well. 1,500, almost 1,800 and 1,400 for those. All of the Iron Hails doing some pretty decent work across the board. And yeah, the mobility in the end, those Jade Lancers pushed into that final point at the last second, and they were able to kind of pull things out. So we'll go to the bracket as well. And that means F-Pod will be advancing. And we'll see which lobby we're going to be getting in for the final, as that is going to be between F-Pod and the Phoenix King. Alright, so while they get their picks set up, I guess for those who, because we briefly went over how the picks and bans are working for in like early on in the stream, so we'll kind of go over that one more time while we wait for the finals. So for the finals, or I guess for this entire tournament, it has been a pick 5, so each player has a 5-faction pool. For this tournament, that's been upped to 7. However, the total bans has been increased to 3, so you still have a functional faction pool of 4 different factions. It's just adding a little bit more depth to what gets banned. So we're not necessarily facing all of the top factions every single time, though it does get a little bit more confusing overall. So once we have those, I will, I guess, let you know here, and then still show what we have for the between battles. So we have the Phoenix King is now in the lobby, so he is now going to be the home field. And we will clear the picks and bans. There we go. Alright, so we're still waiting on both factions, or both players, to finalize their first picks. Though it does look like we have F-Pod on the Lizardmen for our first one. At least that looks like that's the case, so we're going to roll with that until told otherwise. So it looks like Lizardmen versus Khorne. Once again, we're going to be seeing this matchup this evening. We saw that earlier on, and the Phoenix King was, Phoenix King was on Khorne for that last one, so we'll see if he switches things up just a little bit this time around, considering how the last one went. But I don't know if you necessarily expect the Lizardmen to be rolling with the Shredder of Lustria too many times in a single evening. Well, we'll see if lightning does in fact decide to strike twice here. Though F-Pod was definitely busy with his own matches when Phoenix King played this matchup last, so very unlikely that we'll be having too much insight into this. And then you always run into that, well, they knew I had this build last time, so they would assume I would change it. Or do you just try and go with what you know? So we'll see what both sides kind of figure out last time. Though, a little recap, Phoenix King got a little munched on by the Shredder of Lustria last time round. Almost was able to put the nail in the coffin, though the fact that the Shredder was able to survive made it so it just kind of run rampant through the Khorne forces. Definitely hoping to do a little better in the eyes of the Blood God this time around. Phoenix King is ready to go, just waiting on F-Pod. F-Pod does look like his army is set, so we should be getting right on into our first match of the finals between the Phoenix King and F-Pod. It is going to be on Black Ark for the first match. Definitely has some nice vanguard positions for that, which will probably benefit the Lizardmen more so than Khorne. It looks like Khorne has made some very slight changes, gone a little bit heavier on the bonus versus large. So we do see triple Minotaurs with great weapons, still see Valkia, but in terms of the cultist, has been replaced with a Chaos Warrior with dual weapons, looking to kind of go through those Saurus warriors a little bit better, so it overall should handle that front line a little bit better than it did in the past. So we'll see if the army that the F-Pod has brought for the Lisbon, which is definitely quite a bit different than what we saw in our previous series. So when both sides are loaded in, we can kind of finish going through both sides of the coin. All right, there we go. Both sides finally loaded on in. There we go. So, as said before, we got Chaos Warriors mixed in with those dual weapons. 3 Minotaurs with great weapons, definitely going a lot heavier on the bonus versus large, making sure they're not surprised like the last time. Valkia, same kit as before, just coming in with her spear. Now as for the Elysian forces, definitely quite a bit different than the last one. No Shredder, but instead we are going to be seeing a Skink Priest of Heaven's going to be coming in with the Comet of Casadora. And then that is it for the spell casting on foot, so very, very cheap. Bringing in an Ancient Salamander, Saurus Spears, Saurus Warriors, and then some Chameleon Skinks, Ripperdactyl Riders up in the sky. And then on the far flank, it is going to be more Saurus Warriors and Spears with some Skink cohorts with Javelins to kind of assist them in taking that lower point. So with the armies kind of arrayed against each other here, the only issue here with, well, Khorne in general is going to be a lot narrower on the army deployment, so that is going to be playing into the Lizardmen's advantage. They definitely have more units to be bringing onto the field, but that is going to also make it a lot harder for kind of the Lizardmen to really, because there's a lot more elite units. All of these the Chaos Warriors mixed in with the Minotaurs are going to be able to do a number on most of what the Lizardmen have brought. They don't have a whole lot of things that can deal with a super heavy armor. The Ripperdactyl Riders are kind of a glass cannon, though they will be able to deal with the Chaos Warriors fairly efficiently. And then that Ancient Salamander will also be able to do some decent work against them, and of course that Comet of Casadora. But in terms of straight-on infantry fight, the Saurus Warriors, especially when they're going up against all the Chaos Warriors, especially the dual weapon variants, are going to struggle a bit going up against them. As we're going to be seeing a few more reinforcements with some Salamander hunting packs, so some more armor-piercing, well, bonus versus large missile, and their weapon strength is armor piercing, so they'll be able to kind of do pretty decent work against those Minotaurs. So that's a very nice bit of kind of kit on that. Should do a massive number as long as they're able to kind of stay up and operational. With Valkia kind of flying around, she is going to have to be very mindful of these Ripperdactyl Riders because they do have that bonus versus infantry, and while Valkia is still a very small entity, so they're going to be able to get that benefit off. And we saw in that last matchup, these Ripperdactyl Riders will really tear her a new one very, very quickly. All of the Chameleon Skinks are going to be kind of pushing forward, trying to get as many shots in as they can against those Minotaurs, allowing them to just kind of slow them down, get as much damage in as they can. Pretty much free damage at this point. There's nothing that can really put too much pressure on to them. These Marauder Horsemen of Khorne are going to be trying to get onto the field, but they're going to be struggling a bit to deal with Chameleon Skinks. It is unlike the other large targets. Those throwing axes are going to struggle a bit to find their mark against those Chameleons, and we'll see because we also know that there's plenty of more mobility can be coming that way as more Flesh Hounds are going to be making their appearance, as the Lizardmen just kind of be throwing just enough against that point 3. And right now the Saurus Warriors are going to be kind of falling back to the edge of their point, going to be trying to force to bring those Chaos Warriors and those Flesh Hounds as far forward, and then kind of close that gauntlet a little bit with those Coldwood Spear Riders and those Ripperdactyl Riders, and just kind of hit them with overwhelming numbers. And all the meanwhile, these Ancient Salamanders are just going to be able to get some pretty nice shots into these Chaos Warriors and kind of landing right into the midst of it. And these guys do have that armor-piercing damage in that missile strike, so they'll be able to do some pretty good work against all of these high-armored Chaos Warrior units. And they're just going to be continuing to try and kind of push up, though. There isn't a whole lot to support. The rest of the units are kind of sitting back in reserve onto point 1. Though I'm sure now that they have that point, they'll be wanting to kind of generate and push forward and put all that pressure, especially onto those Salamander hunting packs that are going to be sitting in the rear, because that is going to be a major threat to all of those Minotaurs on that front line. And in comes that second one, so it's going to make it all the more important to kind of shut these guys down, because left free to fire, those Minotaurs will not last very long on that front line, especially when you're going up against Saurus Warriors with spears as well. And we also have some Temple Guard mixed into that, so some a bit more elite units, though those Temple Guard are going to make a fairly decent or a juicy target for that spear that Valkia does have. Though in the meantime, these Ripperdactyl Riders are trying to do what they were able to do the last time around and do some decent work against Valkia, but with these Minotaurs coming in, that is going to be kind of a bit of a pipe dream, as they are going to be kind of forced back into the sky And here is that spear right into those expensive Temple Guard. Not doing a ton of damage, but definitely damage well needed, especially when you're throwing in those Minotaurs. But in the meanwhile, all of these Salamanders are just opening up. And it looks like we have a Common Casadora as well going to be dropping down into their midst. And that should do a nice bit more damage. You'll kind of see that thing fall to the ground. And there it goes. Does a bit of friendly fire, but in the meanwhile also pretty much just breaks these Minotaurs as well as these Chaos Warriors, and that is just going to be one less flank, though we do have more units kind of coming in the rear, though the Lizardmen seem to be off onto a good start as they have a nice lead in that damage, able to already kind of break down some very expensive units on that front line. Valkia, though, is engaging with the rest of her forces, though she isn't going to be too much of a shock and awe character. All of her Minotaurs and the rest of her units are going to have to do a bit more of that, but in comes the vast mobility that Phoenix King has kind of shown that he does quite a bit more in these matches. Most of his reinforcements are often going to be those high mobility units, so Flesh Hound's going to be coming in to look to put a little bit more pressure, as the Lizardmen have captured point 3, but that is what these Flesh Hounds are going to hope to try and turn the table to, and try to get some more points, because they push pretty far into the Lizardman territory as on top of this, but all of the range units are pretty much still up and operational. The Ancient Salamander getting some nice volleys into those Minotaurs, though Valkia is going to be diving down, and this is the target that she really does want to be up against. That Ancient Salamander, a one-on-one, but these Ripperdactyl Riders definitely not allowing that to be a one-on-one for the most part. They're going to be able to try and kind of disrupt her as much as they can, and so far Valkia hasn't been able to land any good hits against that Ancient Salamander, though for the meantime it is able to at least deny that Ancient Salamander the opportunity to kind of fire away. But in the while she has been doing that, these Minotaurs have been broken down. All of these Chaos Warriors are in a bit of a tough spot as well. And then if we look up onto the field here, we do have a nice little kind of surround against these Sora Spears, who have gotten a little bit ahead of themselves away from the rest of the Lizardman forces. And those Temple Guard are very broken down. But there is plenty of units for the Lizardmen to kind of throw their way, while the forces of Khorne are kind of, again, restricted pretty much to their mobility units. I think that was just the last Minotaur falling to the field, but Valkia has taken a lot of damage. These Ripperdactyl Riders may have been taken out of the fight, but they definitely did quite a bit of number to Valkia herself, and there's plenty more units kind of close by, and might be enough to just kind of outright push her off the field. A volley from these Salamanders, if any of them really find their mark against her, should be able to kind of push her off once and for all. Flesh Hounds, though, getting on top of these other Salamanders, doing a very nice job in that case. We do have Feral Cold Ones going to be coming in response to that, try and peel these guys off, but the Flesh Hounds have already done more than enough against these Salamander hunting packs, kind of push these guys back, and with the pressure from these Minotaurs as well, this little pocket in general is going to be in a bit of a dire strait for the Lizardmen, as they're kind of cutting off a lot of their reinforcements. Those Minotaurs with those Flesh Hounds should be able to deal with all of those Feral Cold Ones, no problem, but up on this field where all of the Chameleon Skinks are, the Marauder Horsemen finally getting on top of them, able to kind of shut them down, and things are maybe starting to turn a little bit into the favor of Khorne here, as a lot of the range units from the Lizardmen are now compromised. Not a whole lot of freedom for them, and not a lot of breathing room, since these Minotaurs, if they can get out of this engagement here with those Feral Cold Ones, or at least try and break them quickly before these Salamanders do too much work against them, because those point-blank shots doing a lot of work. Ripperdactyl Riders as well, looking to try and just finish off Valkia for the time being, but while they are off trying to finish off the Lord, all of the rest of the mobility for Khorne is doing a number, coming in with more of these Marauder Horsemen, trying to just collapse upon these Salamander hunting packs. And now that these Salamander hunting packs are really kind of put on the back foot, the Lizardmen really kind of just need to hope that they've got enough funds to kind of bring something in, and they're a little bit low, only 500, so these Salamanders are not going to be very happy with what is coming their way. Valkia has fallen, so that is going to free up these Ripperdactyl Riders to kind of charge in to try and kind of just give some space to the Salamanders. And the only thing here is Khorne may be a little overextended, and they are going to be pulling back. They don't want to get their head chopped off or their hand caught in the cookie jar a little bit too much, and they're going to be trying to regroup and kind of put some more pressure on the rest of the mobility forces as the lizardmen are losing ground on this field, as Khorne is slowly capping point 2, and they already have point 3. So this is going to be a nice little boost for Khorne, as they're going to be able to have all 3 points. Though lizardmen have been able to jump back onto point 2 and at least stop that cap from coming, so the lizardmen are going to be able to get at least a few more points here before the Khorne forces kind of really collapse. But I think Khorne is looking a lot stronger here. They're going to need to really kind of mop up a lot of this mobility. All of the Marauder Horsemen, Minotaurs, and Fleshhounds have been able to really kind of turn the tables against the lizardmen here, as Cold One and Spear Riders coming in response to that with their bonus versus large, though they're going to have to be a little bit mindful because there is still very outnumbered against the rest of the forces, and those Minotaurs, if they're able to get the charge off on to these Cold One Spear Riders, might be enough to kind of turn the table, and that friendly fire isn't exactly going to help those Cold One Spear Riders in that regard, as they took a few too many volleys that they would have been comfortable with, but they should be at least able to break these Minotaurs, and that is exactly what they do. And the Ripperdecker Riders trying to land, but even though since they are flying units, they will not be able to cap that victory point. They will need some kind of land unit to do that, so these Ripperdecker Riders are being best used kind of back against the rest of the mobile core of the Khorne forces, and Khorne has been able to take point 2 now, so they are at that triple cap, so they're going to be able to get some nice bit of a breathing room in terms of just point value here, though there is not a ton on the field as the lizardmen try to mount a little bit of a counteroffensive. The rest of these Marauder Horsemen have used up pretty much all of their ammunition, and in melee they're not going to be able to do nearly as well, especially if they're going to be taking a few volleys from the Salamander hunting packs right into the middle of their midst, but they are able to kind of fire away and finish off at least those Feral Cold Ones and give them some space, but they will be given a parting gift, as a volley from those Salamander hunting packs is able to break 2 of those Marauder Horsemen, and the other one is going to start trying to charging in, but these Ripperdecker Riders being so close should be able to kind of keep these guys off, but getting one more volley in and getting whatever damage they can. And now the lizardmen are back in control of the area around point 2. It will take a little bit for them to kind of get that back, able to kind of at least jump on top of these 2 Fleshhounds, but it is only Feral Cold Ones that are kind of engaging on that far flank. So lizardmen definitely are kind of coming back. Things were looking very good to start with the Khorne forces. Their mobile core was able to pretty much decimate everything that the lizardmen had, all the chameleon skinks. At least one of the salamander hunting packs was able to survive, while the other one got kind of really beaten down, and the rest of these minotaurs and fleshhounds looking to kind of repeat that same thing with this last unit of the salamander hunting packs, and there's not a whole lot here to really kind of stop that from happening. These chameleon skinks are the only thing standing between these salamander hunting packs and some very angry Khorne forces. Those minotaurs of Khorne are going to be able to make some quick work against these guys, and lizardmen are able to just cap point 2, so now they do have 2 to Khorne's 1. But things are looking a little bit on the back foot as they continue to kind of just retreat back, as they need to bring in a few more forces. The Ancient Salamander is at least able to get some parting shots in, though it is going to take some time to whittle down those fully fresh Minotaurs there as they kind of come back onto the field, and they are already kind of slicing away at that Salamander hunting pack, getting some nice bit of damage and pretty much forcing them back there, but they have done some pretty good work so far. The Cold One Spear Riders are going to be looking to kind of just bridge that gap, as you have a second one coming in from the far flank, so this is going to be probably one of those cases where you got that hand in the cookie jar, and the last time Khorne was able to pull back from it, well, unfortunately, having 2 Cold One Spear Riders on both sides of you and a Common Castadora being dropped right into the mist is not going to be very good for the health of the Minotaurs and those Fleshhounds, though that might be doing a bit more friendly fire than they would want, and takes off about a quarter of their HP of their own unit on that Comet, as the rest of the Cold One Spear Riders do get a nice collapse on, though it looks like the Khorne forces are holding back fairly well. I think a bit of that is from that friendly fire onto their own Cold One Spear Riders, though we'll see if that is going to be able to kind of come back for the Lizardmen on that front. If we look over on the far point, the forces of Khorne have been able to kind of push back these chameleons and the rest of the units, so they'll be able to kind of take point 3 back with these Fleshhounds and those Marauder Horsemen, and they'll be able to kind of consolidate themselves on that front. Though it does look like Khorne is in a pretty decent position despite that damage disparity with the Lizardmen. Lizardmen definitely don't have the field presence that they want at this point. That mobility that Khorne continues to be able to bring to the field is just able to kind of keep the Lizardmen just back on that back foot. They have been able to finish off those Minotaurs, so that was a nice engagement there. Both of those, but it did take 2 Cold One Spear Riders to do that, and now they're going to continue to kind of push forward, trying to take point 1. Though they definitely don't have to be super worried at this point. Though if you're only bringing in some skink cohorts on the rear, you really do need to kind of fight this mobility game with your own mobility. So that kind of tells me that the Lizardmen don't necessarily have the volume of mobility that Khorne has brought, as they're bringing in more Fleshhounds, utilizing that vanguard position quite well, and are hoping to kind of dive down and surround these Cold One Spear Riders. So these Cold One Spear Riders do have that bonus versus large, being attacked from both sides, and especially when you're unable to get that charge on either one of them, those Cold One Spear Riders definitely going to be struggling a bit on that front, already down to about half HP, as both of those Fleshhounds still sitting very strong here. So that is a very nice engagement for Khorne. The Khorne is kind of getting pushed back and nothing really contending point 3, and that is where these Chameleon Skinks are going to be trying to push their way in. Though at this point, you probably are going to be needing to be triple capping for the Lizardmen, unless they're going to be able to kind of take that point 3 very quickly. And a nice comment when we drop down, Fleshhound's able to kind of tank most of that, probably definitely hoping for a bit more damage out of that fight, but all 3 of these Fleshhounds are going to be able to kind of push it back, these Cold One Spear Riders, and a 4th one is off on the horizon already, nice and raring to go. So you're still going to be emerging with pretty much 2.5 Fleshhounds from this engagement for Khorne. So that is more than enough to really kind of put pressure on, especially considering these are just some skink cohorts, and they're going to be able to kind of swarm and kind of keep them at bay from getting on to point 1. So while the Lizardmen will be able to control points 3 and 2, point 1 still is going to be a bit of a stretch for them to kind of come out and get. You're going to be bringing in some Sora Spears, but they are going to take a very long time to get all the way out to point 1. And while in the meantime, Khorne probably going to have quite a bit on the back burner to bring in more and more mobility, as we're going to be seeing these Marauder Horsemen charging forward again, just going to be trying to put some more pressure. Though even just these 2 Marauders probably isn't enough, and that's why we're going to be seeing these Fleshhounds as well, going to be starting to cycle their way down here to really just try and get onto point 3, force the Lizardmen to look multiple different directions, because if the Lizardmen have to split their attention to points 3 and 1, it is going to be a lot harder for them to kind of do much, and they can't really overextend here with that threat of the Vanguard being dropped right on them, as more and more Fleshhounds can kind of dive right out of that gate, and they're going to be looking to again slow these guys down and keep them away from point 1 for as long as possible. While on the other side, these Fleshhounds and Marauder Horsemen seem to be doing fairly decently against these Chameleon Skinks, and should be able to break them off that point, though you do have these skink cohorts as well, who are going to be trying to get some shots off onto these Marauder Horsemen. And I think those Horsemen are going to be just charging right on into melee to try and keep those skinks from taking too many shots at them. They might get one full volley off, but not doing a whole lot of damage before they do charge into melee. And that Ancient Salamander could probably do some decent work charging in, utilizing that mass, but the rest of those Fleshhounds all just breaking that Chameleon Skink, and are just going to be able to kind of just collapse upon the skink cohort. We do have another Cold One Spear Rider coming in, but points are not what the Lizardmen have in abundance of right now, with Khorne still commanding one of the points. If they are able to take this point 3, that might be just a little bit too much for the Lizardmen to retake in time, as they're going to get surrounded once again by all of these Fleshhounds. More Feral Cold Ones coming in, but these 2 Fleshhounds holding that Cold One Spear Rider in position, and that is going to try and but I mean, at the same time, this point is not yet in control of the Khorne forces. It is getting very, very close. And if we look back up onto the top field, there is nothing contending point one. And especially once these spears get on here, there is no way that Khorne is going to be able to take that top point back from the Lizardmen. So this is going to be kind of where Khorne needs to get enough stuff onto point three, though they themselves are almost running out of time, because on that top field it is almost in control of the Lizardmen, and that will stop that timer if Khorne is unable to get some kind of points back. So the Lizardmen might just be in a good enough position. They're just kind of slowing things down, tying all of these Fleshhounds together. I think definitely the Khorne needs to pull back some of these Fleshhounds onto point three, and that is what they're going to be trying to do to break these skink cohorts. But it might be just a little too late. We will see. It is going to be very, very close. Lizardmen have points 1, 2, and 3 at least for the time being. As we swing back to point 3, Khorne is diving on top of that. It is going to be a very close, and they may just... It is going to be... So they cap it. They have 100 to 2. I think Khorne still has enough time. It is going to be very, very, very close. But there is more Cold One Spear Riders diving in, but there's just so many units on the field, and kind of, well, these spears are not going to make it onto point 3 in time. That would kind of open up that back door to point 1, but this is, I think at this point, there's no way that either side is going to be changing the outcome of any of these points. It is very, very close. So 50 points to 100. So Khorne right now is going to win if the Lizardmen are unable to change the outcome of this point. They need to take point 3. So they need to throw everything and anything into this point. But that is exactly what Khorne is also doing. Fleshhound's going to be kind of diving down into point 3. And I think that is going to be it. There's not enough time for the Lizardmen to take point 3. They might get enough onto the point in time. They are starting to slowly waver that point back and forth, but there's only 20 points to go. It is not going to be time enough for the Lizardmen to change that outcome, and Khorne is going to be taking that first point of the day. Very, very close for the Lizardmen, but unfortunately, it is just not close enough. They just needed a handful of seconds more with that triple cap to be able to take it, but Khorne wins that first one. So that's 1-0 for the Phoenix King. As for the after-battle report, Valkyet did not do so well. Rest of the units not doing too much either, though a couple of the Minotaurs did very well, 2,000 and 1,500. For the reserves, there was even a couple more Minotaurs, but Khorne instead elected to just double, triple, and quadruple down on the mobility. Fleshhounds getting an insane amount, 2,300, 27, 13, and almost 2k on that one. All of the Marauder Horsemen doing some pretty respectable work as well, but these Fleshhounds, they just did so much work, and I'm sure they were all summoned in probably 2-3 times a piece, but that's still a ton of value for all three of them. As for the Lizardmen, Castor did all right, and then the Riperdactyls did as well. Ancient Salamander, even though used up all of its ammunition, only was able to get 1,000 value in total. Rest of the forces, nothing too ridiculous. Chameleon Skinks did well as they are wont to do. Actually, both of the skink cohorts did pretty well at 1,000. And then both of the hunting packs did okay, but again, nothing too ridiculous. All of the Cold One Spear Riders doing some decent work there, but I think just going up against, I mean, at least the Phoenix King style play, you definitely need a bit more mobility than that, though you would think the Cold One Spear Riders would be enough against all those Fleshhounds. That was most definitely not the case. So we'll switch back to here, and we'll see what we've got for our next fight, as the Phoenix King is now up 1-0. But yeah, very, very close fight there. Lizardmen definitely were up quite a bit in terms of damage in that game, but yeah, just the ground that they ceded to the mobility. And we've seen this from the Phoenix King multiple times before, that with all of that mobility, you just kind of break apart any direct, or even just like, you can't just send a unit to get a point. You need to commit more than what you're willing to commit. Otherwise, those flesh hounds would just kind of tear them apart. And so Phoenix King definitely played that quite well with his mobility there in the end of that fight. So well played to both sides, though. And we'll see what we've got coming up for our next one. This one's going to be on Glinty Tooth's Crag. It is going to be in the fiery pits of chaos. This is going to be probably another one of those maps where the mobility is going to be definitely well done, and then is going to be a bit more open though for range. There's not going to be too much in the way in terms of like forests or anything like that, but it is going to have, one side is going to have a bit more of a hill, so you're going to be able to have at least a little bit of safe area in that regards. So it looks like Phoenix King is going to be on the greenskins by the looks of things. Another faction that he played in the semifinals. And FPOD is going to be on the Empire. So again, this is going to be another matchup that the Phoenix King had played in the semifinals. So he played Greenskins into the Empire in that one, and he definitely came out pretty uncomfortably on top in that one. But FPOD is definitely much more familiar with the Empire, so I expect a very strong resistance in this final game, or potentially the final game. Phoenix King definitely going to be trying to wrap things up comfortably, though of course he is probably against FPOD's best faction. So if we remember back to that first semifinal series, Phoenix King won his rubber match with the Greenskin. So again, it was a very kind of similar style to what we've seen, going a little bit more wider on the initial frontline infantry. Greenskins can definitely put out a formidable presence with that mix of orc boys, goblins, and savage orcs. And then again, as he has done in most of his matches up until this point, has been a very mobile core to really try and disrupt any of the reinforcements on the other side. And so far that has been working out very, very well for him. FPOD is ready to go, so we'll see if he is confident in being able to break up Phoenix King's stride here going into game 2. Both sides are set. Phoenix King's just flipping through the banners, and then we will be getting underway with game 2 without too much delay there. Both sides pretty confident in what they were looking to bring. So here's that little preview of things to come. So Greenskin's army for the Phoenix King, actually I think it is the exact army that he brought on the last time round, bringing in all of those orc boys, savage orcs, orc Arab boys, and Wurzag. And then we're going to be up against a slightly different, quite a bit different army for the Empire. It is a FPOD after all. He's going to be still bringing Boris Toddbringer. We also saw a dreaded steam tank thrown into the mix as well, looking for a little bit more frontline strength, and that thing is definitely going to do just that. It is going to be an unbreakable high armor piece. It's going to be sitting right in the center of the ranks. Ah, there we go. Both sides are in. Almost in. There we go. So, same old for Greenskins, Edbutt and Brainburster, as well as Squiggly Beast and Bonewood Staff. As for the Empire forces, there is that Steam Tank going to be taking center stage with the Terror and Unbreakable Perfect Vigor. So as long as it's able to stay engaged with melee, should be able to do some nice bit of work there. Sigmar Sons, Spears, and Swordsmen with some Halberdiers mixed into that front line. Though it is going to be just a dude wall of state troops for the Empire, and then for the Lord it is going to be Boris Todbringer, as he comes in with just the Midlang Runefang up on his Griffin. So that is going to allow some more mobile terror, but a little bit cheaper than the last time we saw him on the field. Bright Wizard coming in with that Burning Head. And that is it for the spellcasting, hoping to kind of break through that front line a little bit quicker. And there isn't any of that range units for the Greenskins army to really kind of compromise, though it is just a wide line-to-line wall of state troops. We'll see if that's going to be able to withstand against the Green Tide, as we have plenty of Savage Orcs and Orc Airboys, which are going to be able to pretty much fire without too much resistance. There's not too much on that Empire side other than Boris himself that can really dive down into the back line. Both sides going to be moving on forward. Greenskins have elected to commit a fairly decent amount of forces there. So we have some Savage Orc Boys, 2 of those, and 1 of the Goblins. 4 units in total, going to be looking to push up onto point 1. Boris himself is also going to be kind of shadowing that point, though he has much more just breadth of units at his disposal for the first starting. Not a whole lot more, but enough that he's going to be able to kind of put whatever units he really wants to. And then with the Bright Wizard also being on horseback, we'll be able to have some mobile support for that spell casting as well. Though, of course, Wurzag is going to be having similar ideas of his own, going to be trying to stay kind of close enough to assist that top point with the spell casting, while the rest of his forces are going to be lined up wall to wall between these 2 fiery pits. Going to be just matching up with the Empire forces. And it is just going to be probably a little bit of a staring contest to start things off. Steam Tank is opening fire against these Savage Orcs with its ranged piece, just trying to get as much poke damage. It isn't going to be devastating any units or anything like that, but any damage is going to be nice to kind of start things off. Peel off as many units as you can against the Savage Orcs. That is definitely one of the bigger threats to all of the state troops. They will be able to win against all of these units on the field. Maybe the Sigmar Sons might be able to put up a bit more of a fight, but the Savage Orcs are like tailor-made to deal with infantry, so they will be able to do quite well indeed without any additional support, and that is what Boris is going to be trying to do, especially also with that burning head of the Bright Wizard. Greenskins are the first ones to the top of the hill. As more and more units, though, we have some Squig Hoppers, so the Durkit Squigs going to be kind of coming in, looking to use their mobility core to really just kind of compromise all of the infantry, and they'll be able to have more than enough good units to go up against them. But Outriders and Grenade Launchers trying to get some volleys in, able to peel off some of the Savage Orcs, and they're going to be trying to get a little bit more space, and they have plenty of units to block all of these Squigs from trying to get on top of them. Greenskins do take point 1, and down does fall Boris as he dives on top of these goblins, looking to try and break these guys as quickly as he can, as the Steam Tank as well is going to be kind of pushing in. And this is going to be a lot of Greenskins going to be committing to those forces. That Bright Wizard just kind of sitting there waiting for his opportunity to get a good shot off, as these Outriders with Grenade Launchers doing a very nice damage, and Burning Head looking to kind of push through. But unfortunately, the Terror has caused these goblins to rout, and it's been doing a lot more friendly fire damage than I wanted. The combination of Burning Head and that Brain Bursta is going to be pushing those Spearmen right into the red, and the Orc Boys with their charge are going to be able to break that unit, though the Steam Tank and Boris Todbringer is definitely going to be able to hold against anything here. And actually, that can be kind of putting Wurzag in a bit of a tough spot, because Boris, if he turns around and kind of goes after Wurzag here, Wurzag is not going to be able to do much against him. Headbutt going down on the swordsmen, doing a nice bit of damage on to them as those halberdiers try and hold off the savage orcs, and all of these squig herds are just going to continue to kind of come through, and with their bonus versus infantry, they're going to be able to do very nice work against everything that the state troops have brought for the Empire. As for the lower fields, they are both kind of just staring at one another, though the wall of the greenskins looking much more formidable than what the Empire has to kind of throw up against them, is going to be taking advantage of that and pushing forward bit by bit to try and get their archers into range and start peppering away at all of the rest of the state troops, while the mobility with all of these Durkat squigs and the rest of squig hoppers doing some nice work kind of pushing back these outriders. Though a nice burning head can be hitting these savage orcs, going right down the line, getting them very close routing, and is going to be kind of bouncing right on back, be getting another second go of it as it does go through these squig herds, as well as it bounces off of the wall here. And a very nice cast on that, perfect geometry for that cast. Though the steam tank, I think, definitely is going to be wanting to get more into all of the thick of things, especially with Boris as well. They're kind of engaged in kind of the fringes of this fight, and more of that mobility that Phoenix King has been bringing to the fights every single time. Orc Boar Boys, they are really holding back the Empire very, very well, and it looks like we had another brain burster going down as well, and Empire is being put on the back foot. The wall is going to go off, and that is not going to be benefiting a ton of units, but it is going to be going off right as the Orc Boar Boys are going to be charging in, hoping to break as many of these units as they can. But I think that wall could have best been saved for just a little bit longer, because none of these units were going to be engaged. The outriders, the grenade launchers, trying to be thinning all of these units here. Maybe trying to get the savage orcs, orc boys, or something like that. But those orc air boys should be able to have the range to kind of respond in kind. And the Empire are kind of slowly kind of working their way up this hill bit by bit. Their outriders with grenade launchers are kind of slowly whittling down the infantry, and both of these Empire Knights are actually doing some pretty decent work against these Orc Boar Boys, trying to kind of finish off them and get a little bit more agency. But there's more. The Broken Tusk Mob, no less, the Orc Boar Boy biggins, and that is going to be a bit of a problem for the Empires. These guys are armor piercing, bonus versus large, and they are gunning it for that steam tank, and that is their best target on the field right now, and they're going to need, or the Empire is going to need to bring some kind of forces here, but it looks like they're going to be electing instead to try and finish off all of these Empire Knights. Going to be charging in, going to be broken a bit up by the halberds as a headbutt goes down just to try and eliminate this bonus versus large unit. And the Broken Tusk Mob are now going to be trying to sweep through all of these Empire Knights, and I think they have the volume to do almost just that. There's not a whole lot to support Boris, and that steam tank don't necessarily want to get involved with that Broken Tusk Mob too much, and the rest of the Empire forces just continuing just kind of just be pushed out of the range of all of the points. We are going to be getting a burning head going to be going through these Orc Arrow Boys. It's going to be getting some damage done. They're actually doing quite a bit, getting that thing down to below half health. But the greenskin is still looking quite strong in terms of at least field presence. The Empire is trading fairly evenly in terms of damage, but they, with the Demigryph Knights coming in, that is going to be hoping to kind of turn the tide of this battle. So the point off to the side is kind of being the center point of this fight. Steam Tank is down to half health, having taken quite a bit of damage. All of these, a lot of the forces that the Greenskins have brought in haven't necessarily been like good bonus versus large units, but it's all had a fair degree of armor piercing, so they've been able to whittle down that steam tank bit by bit, and a nice brain burster going down off right into the middle. Demigryph Knights able to tank most of that, and they're going to be trying to turn the tide of this engagement, and definitely this engagement would definitely benefit from seeing either that steam tank or Boris Todbringer. And Boris Todbringer seems to have kind of circled his way around, and he's going to be engaging with the Orc Arrow Boys, trying to kind of break them up as the Empire forces are going to now finally start going on the offensive, though they still are going to be fairly outnumbered on that field of battle. While more and more mobile units from the Greenskins are going to be streaming in. These Orc Boar Boys going to be tying up that steam tank even more so. Demigryph Knights are getting very, very low as the Broken Tusk mob is still sitting very nice as they're going to be just rotating around, charging right into this Recon Militia, just dogpiling them with all of their mobile core, and that is going to be breaking them very quickly. So things are looking very strong for the Greenskins now as they're starting to pull ahead in that damage, and Boris Tidebring at this point just is unable to really make any big noticeable impact on this fight. He's just been kind of just trying to use his terror and his mass, but he's just been unable to get onto anything that really matters a whole lot, because all of these Night Goblin Squig Hoppers are just going to be having a field day against all of these state troops, and are very good tools of kind of pushing back all these Outriders as they're just trying to just get any kind of foothold, but the Greenskins continue to just be such a thorn in the side of the Empire. They should be bringing down that steam tank any day now, and the Demigryph Knights as well being pushed off by the Broken Tusk mob, and things are looking very dire for the Empire as they just have no kind of just foothold in the slightest. The Greenskins continue to just dominate more and more on the ground field, and nothing that the Empire seems to be throwing at them seems to be working in the slightest. Empire Knights are starting to charge down the hill, trying to collapse upon all these Orc Arrow Boys, who continue to just kind of fire off and push back these Outriders with grenade launchers with the assistance of those Night Goblin Squig Hoppers. But this is pretty much, I think, going to be it for the Empire. Greenskins doing very, very well at holding these points across the board. Broken Tusk mobs able to push back those demis, and that is really the last good answer against the mobility that the Greenskins have brought to the table. And now it's just going to be a swarm down on the lower fields as the Orc Boar Boys, having finished off most of the forces around point 1, are now being brought to bear against these Empire Knights, as they have some nasty Skulkers as well, most likely going to be popping their smoke bomb here to kind of hold those Empire Knights to just be munched upon by all of these units. And yeah, this is pretty much going to be it. More and more Squig herds can be coming on down the field, trying to push, or successfully pushing everything back. And this looks like it is going to be a fairly smooth sailing here from this point on for the Greenskins. Goblin Wolf Riders look like they might actually be failing against the Empire forces on the top, so Empire might be able to take that top point. But yeah, that is going to be it. Greenskins do take the day, and with that, the series. So we'll update the final score. It is going to be 2-0 for the Phoenix King. Warzag did quite well, getting 1371 on his side. And then rest of the frontline units not doing a whole lot. They did kind of spend a lot of that game kind of staring at the opposing state troops, but even with that in mind, not a whole lot of value with them. Most of that value was from the mobility, as it has been for every single game from the Phoenix King. He did very, very well. So Broken Tusk mobs able to get 1300 value. Almost all of that was pretty much on the Demigryph Knights. All of the Squig herds just kind of rampaging through, just using the just sheer weight of numbers. Most of that with those Squig herds just kind of just swarming, breaking things down and escorting them right off the field. As for the Empire, unfortunately, Boris Tidebringer only getting 553, so that's a lot of funds to be spent on a unit that does not get nearly as much. Same thing with the Steam Tank, only getting 800. The Bright Wizard able to get about 1,000, so some respectable amounts there. Rest of the state troops not doing too much on that front. For the reinforcements, demis did all right for value, but otherwise most of the rest of the units not getting a ton in that value department. But that is going to be that. Phoenix King wins the series 2-0, so that makes him the victor of the tournament, and well played to him throughout. Definitely had a style of play that if it isn't broke, don't fix it. So yeah, that mass mobile reinforcements definitely worked very, very well for the Phoenix King in the series, and well played to all. So I hope everyone enjoyed the games. It was a lot of fun casting them. We had some very good matches throughout. And well played to all the contestants of this evening's tournament. Definitely getting rather late for a lot of people, so we are going to wrap things up. I thank you all for watching and hope you enjoyed.